Hey guys, tonight we trudge together into the gray-blue hush of a medieval dawn, where your breath fogs inside a borrowed helmet and the smell of damp hay curls up from the stable floor beneath your boots. You blink into the torchlight and realize with the kind of sleepy disappointment reserved for harsh awakenings that this proud life you imagined as shimmering banners and heroic speeches mostly begins with you trying to stand without falling over in armor that doesn't quite fit. You probably won't survive this, at least not the fantasy version in your head. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment with your location and the local time. It's weirdly comforting to imagine sleepy listeners dotted across the globe while you and I clank through history together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start every morning long before the sun clears the castle towers. The stable boy's footsteps echo down the stone corridor, and that's your alarm clock. No snooze button, no 5 more minutes. You swing down from a wooden cot, so narrow your shoulders barely fit, and the cold rushes straight up through your bare feet. Real knights, the songs claim, wake with purpose and pride. In reality, you wake stiff, sore, and already tired, because yesterday wore you down, and today promises more of the same. Buckram trousers go on first, then the quilted gambeson, thick as an overstuffed mattress and just as breathable meaning, not at all. It smells faintly of sweat, tallow, and last week's rain. Over that comes chainmail, hundreds of interlinked iron rings settling onto your shoulders like an aggressive metal blanket. The mainstream historical fact here is painfully simple. A knight's full kit could weigh well over 40 pounds before weapons were added, most of it resting on hips and shoulders. It's less a suit and more a wearable reminder that gravity has never liked you. Your squire appears, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, trying to help strap in the pieces neither of you can lift smoothly at this hour. Greaves bite at your shins. A cuirass presses into your ribs, narrowing your breath just enough that you have to think about inhaling instead of simply doing it. A buckle surprises you cold against the skin where the gambeson didn't quite cover. Historians still argue whether knights grew stronger primarily from training or simply from years of carrying their daily equipment either way. Your muscles haven't debated the issue. They just quietly protest. Someone hands you your helmet. It's dented, scuffed, and smells faintly of iron and old breath. You lower it over your head, and the world immediately shrinks. Your sight funnels forward, peripheral vision clipped off like reality trimmed with blunt scissors. Sounds turn tinny and enclosed. Your own breathing becomes loud in your ears, harsh, a bellows rhythm that follows you all day. A quirky tidbit passed around the barracks claims some knights stuffed aromatic herbs inside their helmets to mask the smell, but whether that helped or just created a sweaty herbal stew remains blissfully undocumented. You waddle your way into the courtyard where other knights assemble, clanking like a junk drawer dumped onto stone. Everyone looks massive and impressive from a distance. Up close, you notice how many men quietly wince when they roll their shoulders or adjust a strap. No one complains out loud. That would be unknightly. Instead, you swap the sort of jokes that don't require much energy. Someone quips that armor is just medieval shapewear. Someone else says he looks forward to removing it more than winning battles. Joke number 1 of the day lands with a few sleepy groans and a small, honest chuckle. Your routine inspection begins. You check buckles, sword edge, shield face, horse tack. It has to be done daily because a cracked strap or dull blade can end your story faster than any enemy charge. A mainstream fact quietly hums beneath the inspection. Knights were professional soldiers first and foremost, and daily maintenance was essential to survival. Romance rarely includes the hours spent oiling hinges, scrubbing rust, or stitching torn padding, probably because hero carefully applies beeswax to mail shirt doesn't fit easily into epic verse. Your horse waits, steaming slightly in the cold. He's magnificent and infuriating all at once, tossing his head as you approach like he already knows it's leg day for both of you. You mutter to him, something gentle, and improperly respectful as you mount. The process is less graceful than troubadours claim. Your squire steadies the saddle while you swing your leg up with the enthusiasm of an arthritic crane. You thump into place and settle, instantly aware of pressure points protesting beneath armor and saddle. The courtyard gate opens and the troop rides out into quiet fields, hooves crunching frost from the grass. Your visor catches a flare of sunrise, briefly turning the world into molten gold before dull gray returns. This brief beauty almost makes everything worthwhile. Almost. The birds are awake and singing with irritating enthusiasm, unaware their morning soundtrack accompanies men who slept maybe 5 uncomfortable hours. As you ride, your mind wanders to the strange gap between public image and lived reality. The townsfolk see you as a shining hero gliding past. They don't see the bruises forming silently beneath your greaves, or the way your neck already aches from supporting helmet weight. Second joke, you remind yourself that medieval skincare mostly involves wind exposure and dirt exfoliation, which explains why knights age like well-loved saddle leather. You reach the training field, where wooden targets stand in judgmental lines. A trumpet signals drills, lances lower, swords lift. Your body groans into motion, muscles remembering yesterday's repetitions. The truth settles deeper. You don't train for glory. You train to not embarrass yourself in front of men who might one day be shielding your back in battle. Between drills, you catch snippets of camp folklore. Someone swears a knight once slept wearing armor and woke up unable to stand. Another claims a veteran wrapped cabbage leaves on sore joints. The cabbage remedy sounds suspiciously herbal mystical, but you entertain it anyway. When your knees complain, you're willing to believe in leafy miracles. And so, this first morning unfolds a slow, grinding start to a profession built as much on discomfort as on duty. You haven't fought yet today. You haven't faced the enemy, but already you're tired. Already you've learned the first secret of knighthood. Before the clashing swords, before the banners and heroics, there is simply the daily reality of waking up trapped in someone else's idea of honor. You ride back toward the castle with the sun higher now, armor warm and sticky, breath humming inside your helmet like a small trapped animal. This is only the beginning, and somehow you sense that the deeper you step into knightly life, the less glamorous it will become. You're barely back inside the castle walls before the drills begin again, the echo of hooves still ringing in your helmet as you dismount and shuffle toward the worn field behind the keep. There is no gentle cool-down period. Your muscles don't get time to vote on whether they're ready. Training for a medieval knight is relentless, beginning in boyhood long before you ever touch heavy armor. The mainstream historical fact everyone quotes is that future knights typically start as pages around the age of 7, then become squires in their teens, practicing daily with wooden swords, shields, and lances until adulthood. What that means in lived reality is simple. You grew up sore, and now soreness feels like your default setting. You grip a practice sword that is mercifully blunted but still roughly the weight of a small dumbbell made of disappointment. The wooden training post ahead of you has been pocked with thousands of strikes over decades, looking less like a noble target and more like a scarred fence post enduring community abuse. You take your stance as you were taught, feet apart, knees bent, spine tall, and swing. The vibration travels straight up your arms into your shoulders, a physical reminder that imaginary enemies still hit back. The drill master paces behind you all, boots clicking like accusing metronomes. He calls timing beats, snaps, corrections, and occasionally demonstrates moves with unsettling ease. His armor, dented and worn, rattles with every step. You wonder if he ever smiles. Historians still argue whether medieval training emphasized agility more than raw strength, or vice versa. But today, either path hurts the same. Your wrists ache from repeated strikes, and sweat pools under your gambeson long before the midday bell rings. Breaks are minimal. You're allowed a few mouthfuls of water, lukewarm, faintly metallic, and then back you go. Someone jokes that the training sword is just a medieval loyalty test. If you don't throw it into the bushes and walk home, you're knight material. Joke number 1 earns a tired snort from the guy next to you whose fingers are so calloused they look carved instead of grown. Mounted drills follow. You mount, circle the ring, and practice leaning to strike at straw-filled quintains that swing on pivots when struck. Miss your angle or timing, and the returning arm thumps you in the ribs or slaps your back. That's the point. Learning pain without consequence teaches instinct. A quirky tidbit, often repeated, is that medieval instructors intentionally used these swinging targets as discipline tools, letting inattentive squires feel immediate correction like a self-resetting wooden teacher. Your horse sidesteps nervously under the repetitive charging. He's trained better than you, honestly, knowing exactly when to slow or accelerate without conscious thought. You lean low, aim for the straw bundle, and connect with a satisfying thud. The quintain arm spins wide and clips your shoulder just hard enough to surprise a curse out of you that you immediately swallow. Knights aren't meant to swear, or at least, not loudly. By late morning, your thighs feel filled with warm porridge. Dismounting suddenly seems more dangerous than combat. You manage without collapsing. Small victories matter here, and join the others for footwork practice. This involves carefully stepping around circles scratched into the dirt, moving side to side in patterns designed to maintain balance while striking or blocking. The movements resemble a strange medieval dance. Joke number 2 bubbles up as you think that if bards had paid attention, knights would be famous for interpretive choreography instead of swordplay. Lunch is not exactly restorative. You receive coarse bread, a wedge of cheese hard enough to qualify as emergency masonry, and a thin ale more water than beer. You eat standing, leaning against the training rail. Food's primary goal isn't pleasure, it's fuel. Another mainstream fact slips in here. Medieval diets varied widely by wealth and region, but most warriors subsisted mainly on grains, dairy, and whatever vegetables or meat were available. You chew carefully because cracked teeth are not part of the training insurance plan. After lunch comes weapon rotation. Sword drills become spear thrusts, then shield work. Holding the shield raised taxes your shoulder in unexpected ways. Static tension hurts differently than movement. Your arm begins a gentle trembling, like a horsefly restless on your skin. You try to will steadiness, focusing on breath rhythm inside your helmet, harsh, harsh, until the tremor eases just enough to survive the drill. Historians still argue whether knights trained more with swords or lances overall, but the weekly rotations ensure you feel equally unprepared with everything. Occasionally, the masters break the monotony with mock melees. Groups clash with blunted weapons, trying to tag opponents while maintaining formations. It's chaotic, sweaty, confusing, and far less cinematic than promised by legend. Your visor fogs, and more than once you lose track of where everyone is. The drill master shouts for spacing, like a medieval yoga instructor, demanding better posture from a room full of over-caffeinated crows. You accidentally tag a companion's shield too hard. He retaliates with exaggerated flair, taps your shoulder, then bows dramatically. Joke number 3 plays out wordlessly. Improvised medieval theater among exhausted soldiers. For a moment, the tension dissolves, and laughter ripples through the group, brief and welcome. As afternoon drags on, your perception dulls. Drills blur together into a loop of movement, correction, repetition. Sweat dries and reforms. Muscles settle into a painful acceptance. A strange comfort emerges in the sameness. Your world reduces to the next command, the next target, the next inhale. By evening, the call to cease training echoes across the yard. You remove your helmet and feel fresh air wash across your face like a small mercy. Faces around you look hollowed young men aged temporarily by exhaustion. And you think of childhood afternoons spent on similar fields, but with wooden swords and fewer consequences. Those games became this labor. Dreams of gallantry hardened into duty before you could object. As you stagger toward the armory to stow practice weapons, your shoulders scream quietly. You haven't even donned battle armor today, just training gear. The realization settles heavily. This daily repetition is what turns boys into knights. Sure, but it also claims pieces of you bit by bit, grinding enthusiasm into endurance. And tomorrow, at dawn, the routine will repeat. The training never really stops, it only changes shape. You lie down later that night with wrists aching, thighs throbbing, and hands still curled around the memory of sword grips. Sleep comes quickly, fueled by exhaustion rather than peace. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a small voice whispers that the heroic life you imagined never included soreness as a permanent companion. Your muscles still echo yesterday's drills when you step into the stable at dawn, the air thick with the mingled smells of hay, damp leather, and something distinctly manure adjacent. This is now your second reality, caring for the warhorse who doubles as your transportation, prestige symbol, and most unpredictable coworker. The mainstream historical fact rests squarely here: knights were utterly dependent on their horses, especially specially bred destriers or coursers trained for battle. Without a healthy mount, you're not just inconvenienced, you're effectively demoted to very expensive pedestrian. Your horse greets you by snorting into your chest as you brush his coat. It feels less like affection and more like he's checking to see if you're edible. Grooming takes longer than you expect. Mud hides in places mud really shouldn't hide. You scrape hooves with a tool that looks medieval, even by medieval standards, convinced every flick might send your finger into dangerous proximity with large, opinionated teeth. Historians still argue whether knights personally cared for their mounts or relied mainly on grooms, but standing here at sunrise with a stiff brush in your hand, it feels personal enough either way. Feeding your horse is a ritual of suspense. You measure oats carefully, because too much can cause digestive trouble, and too little makes him cranky, which is like dealing with a 1,000-pound mood swing. A quirky tidbit you picked up from stable gossip claims that some medieval horsemen mixed ale into feed to encourage appetite during long campaigns. Whether that truly worked or merely created tipsy horses lost to folklore remains unclear, but the image alone makes you smirk. Joke number 1. Drunken war horses wobbling through jousts would at least have made tournaments more entertaining. Daily tack adjustments follow. Saddles are refitted constantly to avoid sores along the horse's back, and reins are checked for fraying that could spell disaster mid-charge. You oil leather straps until the smell of tallow clings permanently to your fingers like a stubborn ghost. These small tasks consume surprising time. Songs never mention them. Ballads leap straight from heroic greetings to valiant clashes, conveniently skipping mornings spent counting oats. Mounting up after chores feels like a betrayal of the sore joints you borrowed yesterday. Your hips protest, shoulders wince, but you're aloft. The horse moves beneath you, a steady rolling gait that forces your body to subtly compensate with each step. It's exercise hiding behind transportation. By the time you reach the outer fields for mounted maneuvers, your legs are already shaking politely. Training on horseback requires harmony you're still mastering. You adjust reins lightly, steer with knees, and keep your back tall, all while preparing to strike targets at speed. The quintain's straw face mocks your aim. You lean, swing, connect, and this time dodge the spinning arm by inches. Joke number 2. Surfaces as you imagine requesting safety padding for medieval practice fields, picturing bubble wraps strung along wooden posts. Your horse snorts afterward, offended by near collision with wood. You mutter reassurances, patting his neck, though you're not entirely sure if horses appreciate verbal encouragement or just tolerate the sounds humans make. The deeper frustration emerges when you consider cost. Maintaining a warhorse burns coin faster than battlefield pensions. Feed, tack repair, shoeing, stable upkeep, it adds up constantly. The mainstream fact most outsiders miss: horses represented one of the largest personal expenses for knights. Lose your mount in battle or sickness, and replacing one could financially devastate you. Historians still argue whether this economic pressure limited who could realistically pursue knighthood long-term, but watching grain disappear into feed troughs each morning makes the debate feel financially personal. At midday, a farrier arrives. The sharp ring of hammer on anvil blends with bird calls. You hold your horse steady as hooves are lifted, trimmed, and fitted with iron shoes. Sparks slide over stone like tiny falling stars. Your hand cramps from gripping reins too continuously, yet you don't loosen your hold. Trusting a half-ton animal standing on 3 legs while a fourth receives metal isn't a moment for casual confidence. The farrier shares a traveling story between strikes some old tale of a knight whose horse refused to cross a shallow brook, convinced it was a death trap, until someone tossed a cloak over the water, and the horse stepped calmly across, thinking the danger was gone. True or fringe folklore, you relish the slight break from routine. When shoeing is done, you take your horse for a brief walk to ensure the fit feels right. Movement is smoother, his stride almost eager. You imagine for a moment what it might feel like to ride without weight of armor, wind on your face, legs loose, and immediately shelve the thought. Fantasy will just distract you. Afternoon brings conditioning rides. Galloping along hedgerows at controlled pace strengthens thighs and steadies breathing rhythms. The countryside flickers by in greens and browns, ancient fields dotted with sheep that barely notice mounted men charging past. Your heartbeat matches the rhythm of hooves, creating a hypnotic tempo, thud, 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 thud. For a few minutes, discomfort retreats and motion feels cathartic. Then your lower back reminds you of reality. The saddle, though necessary, digs relentlessly into tender muscles. Sweat trickles down your spine, helmet heat collects around your face. You resist the urge to lift the visor. Discipline demands full kit even during training ride, because battle doesn't pose for comfort. As you slow the horse to a walk near evening, fatigue wraps you tightly. You slide down from the saddle stiffly, landing heavier than graceful departures demand. Joke number 3 appears as you imagine Olympic judges scoring your dismount enthusiasm high, elegance tragically absent. Back in the stable, you unsaddle, brush the horse again, and watch steam rise off his coat as the day cools. He rests easy now, while you feel like someone wrung you out and hung you to dry. It strikes you unfairly but inevitably that your horse's day includes meals, exercise, socialization, and naps. Yours includes upkeep of everything else. As you head toward the keep, boots crunching straw fragments, you feel quiet admiration for the animal you depend on so completely. He doesn't care about chivalry or glory. He wants comfort, regular food, and predictable handling luxuries you don't always secure for yourself. The knight's life, you realize, isn't only about battling enemies. It begins here, brushing mud, counting oats, adjusting straps, spending your energy to maintain another creature's strength. And though the ballads never say it, the truth feels steady beneath you like your horse's warm back if he cannot carry you forward. All the armor and training in the world mean nothing. The armor waits for you on its wooden stand like a patient iron predator, every plate and rivet arranged for reassembly. Yesterday's lighter training gear spared you the true weight, but today demands the full ensemble. The mainstream fact is straightforward. A knight's complete battle harness could weigh anywhere between 40 and 60 pounds, depending on era and style, distributed across limbs, torso, and head. Well designed for mobility, yes, but still an intimate partnership with relentless gravity. You begin piece by piece. First comes the thicker gambeson, now cool and clammy, its quilted padding hugging your shoulders. Then chainmail settles again like a metallic sigh. Your squire tightens straps with focused silence. Greaves clamp over shins, cuisses wrap thighs. Each buckle adds a tiny increment of compression, the world inching tighter around you until breathing feels slightly more intentional. Finally, the cuirass slides into place, heavy across your chest, forcing your posture upright or else pinching fiercely at your ribs. The helmet waits last, offering its familiar sense of isolation. You hesitate before lowering it, savoring free air for 2 stolen seconds. Then the visor clicks down, and your hearing dulls, your vision tunnels. Joke number 1. You privately think it feels like voluntarily wearing a deluxe cooking pot, except the stew inside is you. Once fully armored, you take your first step and your second testing balance. Armor is designed to flex where joints move, but every motion still meets resistance. The metal parts add inertia to your limbs. A simple walk becomes a minor exercise routine. Your toes scrape the stone floor once, nearly sending you face first toward dignity loss, but you recover with a forced dignity you hope looked intentional. Stepping into sunlight, the temperature climbs with shocking speed. The gambeson traps warmth like insulation deliberately engineered to preserve medieval misery. Sweat beads under your scalp almost immediately. You adjust the visor vent to maximize airflow, which still produces roughly the effect of breathing through polite cheesecloth. Historians still argue how frequently knights wore full harness outside combat situations, but whether it's daily or occasional, even a few continuous hours in this shell feel monumental. Training drills resume with a vengeance. Footwork, mock clashes, formation pacing. You feel surprisingly stable once momentum builds. Armor shifts weight and occasionally cushions minor blows, but it also punishes indecision. Sudden directional changes tug muscle groups in conflicting ways. An inattentive pivot produces a pinch near your hip that makes you wince physically but suppress any vocal complaint. Knights suffer silently, or at least publicly. You help another knight to his feet after he stumbles sideways during shield practice. The clang of metal meeting metal echoes like church bells gone feral. He mutters a thanks and quips something about knights secretly training as walking blacksmith shops. Joke number 2 lands in the shared humor of exhaustion. As noon approaches, the heat becomes the real adversary. Your undershirt darkens. Sweat trickles down into your boots, creating an oddly aquatic sensation you did not request. You picture medieval knights with tiny horizontal visor wipers like early automobiles. Your mental joke number 3 before returning your focus to not staggering. Lunch intervals happen in armor. There's no easy unbuttoning break. Bread is shoved through the visor slit in awkward fragments. Drinking involves careful tilting and trust that ale won't cascade down your chin directly into padding. Your squire misjudges a pour once, soaking the front of your gambeson. You just stare. He apologizes profusely, nearly more upset than you are. Damp padding combined with heat becomes a personal sauna of discomfort. In the afternoon drills, you practice rolling falls. Armor protects from serious injury but shifts your center of mass upward. Each tumble thuds loudly, rattling inside your own isolation chamber. You hear nothing but your pulse for a few seconds while lying flat on the dirt, staring upward at vapor trails from passing clouds through the visor slit. It's strangely peaceful before the sergeant barks you back into motion. Between exercises, someone shares a camp tidbit. There's a rumor that some knights secretly removed pieces of armor during marches, risking discipline charges for relief. No direct evidence confirms widespread rule breaking, but honestly, you believe it instinctively. Historians still argue whether marching in full harness was common or if lighter traveling gear was more typical. Either way, you sympathize deeply with any predecessor who loosened a buckle in moments of privacy. By late afternoon, fatigue compounds. Everything weighs more now, not because the armor increased mass, but because you decreased strength. Your posture slumps imperceptibly, prompting corrections from the drill master who demands prideful bearing. You manage pride, but mostly deliver stubborn compliance. When training finally ceases, the unarmoring ritual begins. Removing gear happens slowly, carefully, because rushing exhaustion with steel parts nearby seems ill-advised. The cuirass lifts off first, your lungs expanding into the sudden space gratefully, like balloons recovering volume. Greaves unfasten, chainmail slithers away. Each layer gone reveals salty sweat beneath, clothing plastered to your skin. It's not glamorous. It's not heroic. It's relief. As you wipe your face, steam rises faintly from your shoulders. Someone jokes about knights paying good money for this elite dehydration regimen. You laugh weakly. Your physical energy feels spent, but mental fog remains dense. That evening, you sit on a wooden bench rubbing red chafed lines where straps press too long. Your hands leave faint metallic smudges on skin like accidental medieval tattoos. The armor gleams quietly on its rack again, innocent of the punishment it dealt you. You regard it not with pride, but wary acceptance, like recognizing a demanding coworker who never takes a day off. The songs always promise shining steel as a symbol of noble might. To you, now, it represents daily compression, heat, and fatigue. It's protection, yes, but also a constant companion of discomfort, turning every movement into a labor negotiation between ambition and anatomy. As you lie down later, limbs heavy, you realize the crushing reality isn't just the physical weight, it's knowing you'll repeat this ritual tomorrow and the next day, and for years if fortune doesn't intervene. Armor keeps you alive, but it makes sure you never forget what survival costs. The morning rises slowly, the sun spilling pale golden light across the camp, illuminating tents that sway lightly in the gentle breeze. Dew clings stubbornly to the grass and muddy pathways, soaking the tips of your boots as you stretch, feeling each muscle protest with a familiar, dull ache. Your shoulders, back, and hips remind you of yesterday's exertions, and you know that the rhythm of your life as a knight begins long before comfort, long before a proper meal. The mainstream fact is simple yet uncompromising. A knight's day starts with duty. Armor lies nearby, heavy and unyielding, waiting for the ritualized struggle of fastening, tightening, and adjusting a daily meditation in weight and restraint. Historians still debate how strictly these morning routines were enforced across regions and social ranks, but the physical strain is universal, unavoidable, and utterly grounding. Breakfast is functional, almost austere. Hardened bread with the faint tang of last week's baking, a thin slice of dried meat that seems determined to snap under your teeth, and cold, clear water from the nearby stream. Your squire, ever eager, fusses over reins, stirrups, and saddlebags that never seem to align perfectly, and you can't help but notice the minor chaos with a small, dry smile. Joke number one drifts quietly in your mind. Knights, pioneers of wearable endurance training, long before gyms and yoga mats existed. Repetition in this morning ritual establishes a rhythm, a pacing of muscles and mind that, while exhausting, offers a strange reassurance, an order in a life otherwise dominated by unpredictable terrain and weather. Armor assembly follows its well-worn sequence, almost ritualistic in its precision. You slide into the padded gambeson, feeling the quilted layers hug your torso. Chainmail comes next, the interlocking rings heavy yet somehow flexible, a subtle pressure along your arms and legs. Cuisses and greaves protect your thighs and shins, pauldrons settle on your shoulders, and finally, the breastplate locks into place, pressing firmly against your chest. Your helmet completes the ensemble, and as you lift it, the smell of oiled leather and metal greets you a scent that is unmistakably knightly. Each buckle and strap presses against your muscles, compressing comfort for the sake of readiness. Humor drifts quietly, a mental distraction. You imagine yourself as a medieval tortoise, armored yet somehow graceful. The rhythmic clinking of metal against metal becomes a surprisingly soothing soundtrack, each movement part of a meditative, mechanical cadence. Mounted, the column begins its march across rolling fields and woodland patches dappled with morning light. The sound of hooves striking mud and stones is hypnotic, transmitting subtle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat forms beneath layers of armor, dampening the inner fabrics, yet the constant motion brings a strange meditative calm. A quirky tidbit occupies your mind. Knights sometimes carried small charms, herbs, or trinkets in saddlebags, tucked carefully against the leather, believed to bring luck or ward off minor illnesses. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these talismans, yet the ritual itself, the sense of preparation and control, provides comfort psychological reinforcement against the unpredictability of both terrain and skirmish. By mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland. Branches scrape armor and helmet, forcing tiny, constant posture adjustments. Your horse flinches at a sudden rustle, and your muscles tighten reflexively. Joke number two surfaces gently. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. The tension relaxes once the creature disappears, and the rhythmic cadence of movement resumes. Sunlight filters through leaves, casting moving patterns on armor and ground. You notice the small pleasures, the smell of wet earth, the occasional bird call, and the faint scent of wildflowers brushing the edges of the trail. Even amid effort, the world offers subtle, soothing sensory notes. By noon, the column pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink, nostrils flaring, and you remove helmet and gauntlets, feeling a welcome relief as air touches sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance, enough to maintain energy for the second half of the day. Conversation is sparse, focused on terrain, animals, and the occasional observation about travel logistics. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better sustained morale. Here, quiet seems sufficient. You allow your eyes to wander over the water, reflecting the trees above, letting the calm seep into your muscles and mind. The afternoon stretches long across hills and flatter paths. Your weight shifts constantly to accommodate uneven terrain, saddle pressure, and the subtle movements of your horse. Sweat and grime cling to your skin beneath armor, tactile reminders of effort and persistence. Joke number 3 drifts through your mind. Nightly meditation, mastering micro-adjustments while barely moving. Repetition, though exhausting, anchors both body and mind. With each passing mile, you feel the slow layering of experience, the rhythm, the minor victories of endurance, the tactile connection to earth, horse, and gear. It is exhausting, yes, but it is also grounding, quietly satisfying in its relentlessness. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount with care, assisting your horse over uneven ground. The removal of armor brings profound relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires are lit, their smoke curling lazily into the evening air. Meals are simple, yet sustaining. The wind whispers through trees, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Sleep promises temporary reprieve, a chance to rest before the next day of exertion. And in that quiet, with the subtle sounds of village life and nature wrapping around you, the day closes with endurance, repetition, and small, understated victories that no song will ever celebrate, yet your body and mind quietly honor. Camping begins before you even notice the light has fully surrendered. After a ride that seemed determined to last longer than daylight, you dismount near a shallow hedgerow beside several other returning knights, and the modest clearing immediately becomes your temporary world. There are no grand battle tents or colorful awnings waiting contrary to painted manuscript fantasies. The mainstream fact holds firm. Most medieval camps were practical, cramped, smoky clusters of canvas or improvised shelters, focused on efficiency rather than comfort. You shrug off your helmet with tangible relief and wipe accumulated grit from your brow. The smell of sweat, horse, wet leather, and nearby cook fires mingle into one dense atmospheric soup. A few servants and squires move briskly with practiced motions, staking tent poles, laying rolled rugs to keep bedding from direct soil contact. You assist by hauling bundles and stamping pegs into soil using the heel of a boot because mallets are apparently mythical objects. Once the tents stand, if stand generously includes leaning slightly at fatalistic angles, you unload supplies. Rations come first: sacks of grain, dried meat strips, hard cheese wheels wrapped tight in cloth. Someone lights a cooking fire using tinder prepared earlier. Smoke drifts low, weaving between tents like shy specters before finding the sky. You collapse onto a bundled blanket while unfastening armor inch by inch. It's not ceremonial undressing. It's survival-grade removal of everything causing pressure points. Chainmail drops with a gentle metallic slither onto canvas. Greaves and pauldrons stack into small hills around you. Beneath everything, your gambeson hangs damp and heavy. You feel like a sponge wrung, but not fully dried. Food arrives. A thin pottage ladled from a smoking pot into wooden bowls, dotted with barley grains and a few wilted greens, you optimistically identify as cabbage. A chunk of bread accompanies it. The taste is unambitious but warm. Out here, warmth beats flavor by a wide margin. Historians still argue whether camp diets were calorie sufficient for active knights, given the intense energy demands of armor-laden travel. All you know is that your stomach doesn't feel fully satisfied, but at least it's no longer protesting loudly. Someone recounts a story while chewing. A veteran swears that during a winter march, someone used heated stones slipped into boots to fend off frostbite until they realized the rocks were igniting wool socks. Whether true or exaggerated camp folklore remains uncertain. Joke number 1 sparks as someone quips about first recorded foot warmers, slight fire risk included. After dinner, the great boredom begins the waiting that exists as the soul of military camping. There is little to do beyond cleaning weapons, checking gear, smoking out damp boots near the fire, and occasionally shifting position to maintain circulation. Your sword receives a patient wiping with oiled cloth until its edge catches reflection from firelight. The repetitive task calms you the way folding laundry soothes modern minds. Fleas, however, introduce themselves as persistent critics of stillness. No sooner have you settled than small scratches pepper your ankles and calves. You swat absent-mindedly, earning little victory. A quirky tidbit circulates. Medieval travelers believed burning certain herbs repelled vermin. Whether it helped or simply perfumed the bites is unclear, but someone tosses sage onto the fire anyway. The aromatic smoke smells wonderful and does absolutely nothing noticeable against the fleas. As night advances, subtle camp sounds layer around you. Horses shifting their weight, soft conversation murmurs, crackle of wood, distant owl hoots. There's peace here despite discomfort. Joke number 2 arises as you imagine medieval sleep app options. Looping campfire hooves plus complementary insect hum. The tents offer little insulation. You crawl inside yours, no taller than your knees when seated. The blanket smells like damp wool and faint mold. You lay armor pieces near your head for immediate access, the habit of constant readiness overriding your desire to separate from hard objects. Lying flat proves surprisingly challenging. Your body resists the unfamiliar horizontal stretch after so many hours in saddle and stance. Your lower back complains openly. You shift sideways, tuck a rolled sleeve under your neck as primitive pillow substitute. It barely qualifies as comfort but beats stone ground. Sleep comes lightly at first. Every crack of wood or wicker of horse cuts through your awareness. You're conditioned now to awaken instantly. Historians still argue how deeply soldiers slept in active camps. Many descriptions suggest fragmented rest filled with alert, half-dreaming similar to your own current experience. You drift, stirred awake repeatedly by nearby snoring. That sounds like troubled bellows, by a cold breeze sneaking under the tent flap, by a flea bite too well aimed. Joke number 3 floats into your half-consciousness. You picture nights raiding campsites like modern travelers, 0 stars, ground too firm, wildlife aggressive. Cold thickens toward morning. Warmth from the cooking fire has long since faded. Your breath fogs near your face. You curl slightly inside the blanket, wishing for a second layer. But you don't dig for it because re-emerging from shallow sleep would cost more energy than shivering saves. Eventually, exhaustion overrides discomfort, pulling you into deeper rest. Dreams come muddled paint smears, echoes of drills, swinging quintains, muddy roads that twist into infinite loops. You chase messages on horseback that never reach recipients. You remove armor only to find more armor beneath. You wake briefly confused and smile weakly at the absurdity. As dawn seeps gradually through the canvas seams, camp stirs awake. Servants rekindle fires. Horses snort and stamp. Your eyes open heavy with grit. Joints protest the return to motion. You emerge from the tent like someone born prematurely into the morning. Fresh dew dampens your boots. The smell of smoke returns. Breakfast nearly identical to yesterday's dinner waits patiently. As you chew bread under the widening sky, you take in the reality around you. Knights clustered not as shining champions, but as weary laborers of duty. No banners unfurled. No triumphant horns sounding, just routine resetting itself for another day. Camp life promises neither dignity nor restful recovery. It offers survival, sleep, and functional meals, and enough shelter to keep going, but no more. Romance belongs to artists who never spent a night swatting fleas within canvas walls. And so your morning begins where your night ended, tired but required. The long-standing truth settles deeper: you are not a knight of legend. You're a professional living out of a tent, doing your best to endure the small miseries that compose the majority of your experience. Morning inside the camp doesn't bring rest, it brings arithmetic. You sit on an empty grain sack with a wax tablet balanced across your knee, trying to tally costs with the sleepy seriousness of someone doing taxes before surviving breakfast. Knighthood sounds prestigious, but the mainstream fact that lurks beneath all the armor is that you finance much of your own existence. Your liege may grant land or allowances, but ongoing expenses remain stubbornly personal. You list necessities slowly: feed for your horse, repairs for tack, replacement straps, sharpening services for blades, shoeing fees from the farrier, servant wages. Your squire might be young, but he still expects meals and coin and periodic indulgences like new gloves when the old ones finally surrender to sweat rot. The numbers stack higher than your patience. Historians still argue how economically comfortable knights truly were. Noble endowments existed, but many lived cash, poor, prestige, rich lives, especially during extended campaigns. The good mood of morning dissolves steadily as you scratch figures into the tablet. You realize the last chainmail repair cost nearly the same as a week's horse feed. Last tournament fees remain unpaid. You haven't even looked at armor upgrades modernizing your gear to match trends among wealthier competitors. Joke number 1 surfaces bitterly. You consider trading glory for a stable desk job, picturing yourself wearing the ergonomic armor of sensible chairs. Your squire joins you with a wooden cup of thin ale. You accept gratefully. He chats about learning to read simple tally marks from clergy, hoping someday to manage finances better than stabbing problems. You encourage him because the idea of someone developing a stronger relationship with arithmetic than you currently enjoy seems morally supportive. Mid-morning brings a visit from a camp quartermaster. He reminds you politely yet unmistakably that your contingent still owes transport fees for borrowed wagons during the previous march. You nod while mentally rearranging imaginary coin piles that do not physically exist. You promise settlement soon. The definition of soon remains flexible. Training resumes a bit late, providing temporary narrative relief from budgeting anxiety. Shield wall drills distract muscles better than numbers ever did. Yet, financial worries hum in the background through each movement. You think about the consequences of falling behind, selling personal items, borrowing from fellow knights, or, worst case scenario, surrendering land rights granted through service. Prestige can fade quietly when money dries. During water break, someone passes a tale. A knight nearby pawned silver spurs to fund emergency saddle replacement, riding anonymously with plain replacements until reclaiming the proper pair months later. A quirky tidbit, but telling status, is fragile enough to hinge on ornamentation. Joke number 2. You imagine knights secretly mixing up spurs like overdue library books. You glance down at your own spurs, scuffed rather than gleaming. The thought that even little details announce economic standing unsettles you more than expected. Power looks uniform from afar. Up close, wealth distinctions gleam sharply. By afternoon, a servant delivers a small parchment note from a merchant. Leather strap shipments are delayed, and replacement pricing has increased due to supply disruptions from bandit activity along trade routes. You suppress a groan. Even combat-adjacent fields like logistics batter your finances from behind. Historians still argue whether rampant insecurity most strained medieval economies or if inefficient marketplaces played greater roles, but whichever the culprit, your wallet feels the direct impact. You attend a mandatory review with your liege's steward, who emphasizes repairs before upcoming maneuvers. You nod obediently while envisioning future debt columns deepening. Obedience remains cheaper than dissent, thankfully. Evening returns you to campfires where tongues loosen and worry becomes communal. Conversations drift inevitably into finances. One knight claims owning land saves him from daily budgeting. Another counters that harvest unpredictability makes land stewardship its own gamble. You listen quietly, stirring pottage with your spoon, recognizing firsthand how relative everyone's comfort is. Joke number 3. Someone quips that a knight's true enemy isn't rival lords, it's unexpected saddle failure during peacetime when nobody's paying you danger wages. Later, in your tent, wax tablet laid beside your armor, you update the figures with grim accuracy. There's never enough coin to align with the ideal image promised by knighthood's legends. Instead of generosity and lavish feasting, you practice careful planning, hoping gear doesn't fail before income recovers. Sleep arrives clouded with numbers. You dream of coins rolling across cobblestones beyond reach, always skidding under armor racks or falling into deep saddlebags that vanish when opened. You reach for them, and instead grip straw bedding. Awakening before dawn, stiff from tent floor, the old equation lingers, balancing survival and prestige constantly. You stretch carefully, joints creaking like camp timbers. Another day means another dance with swords, horses, and tallies alike. The unspoken truth of knighthood becomes increasingly clear. Beneath every shining breastplate beats the anxious heart of a small business owner managing equipment, transport, wages, and risk. You are entrepreneur, accountant, and warrior simultaneously, none of the roles easily mastered, all demanding energy you barely possess. As camp stirs to life again, you close your ledger and fit the gambeson over your shoulders. Responsibility settles heavier than steel. Soon you'll be practicing combat maneuvers or riding patrol, not because battle beckons, but because service payments require continued demonstration of value. In this life, courage isn't simply charging forward into danger, it's enduring the quiet stress of finances without letting them erode your focus. You step out into the pale morning determined to keep armor polished and accounts as balanced as possible, though history suggests that combination is one of knighthood's trickiest challenges. The courier's horn echoes through camp just after sunrise, sharp and unpleasantly cheerful. News travels by breath before parchment. Your liege requires immediate attendance at a border muster. You barely process the request before the familiar tension slides into place. The mainstream fact is unavoidable feudal obligation means knights stay perpetually on call. Your lord's summons overrides personal plans, fatigue levels, or financial woes. You ride when called because that is the contract binding land, title, and survival together. Within minutes, camp vibrates with activity. Servants rush to strike tents. Squires pack essentials into saddlebags. Horses are resaddled before morning feed is even fully chewed. You swallow a last mouthful of bread, still tasting faintly of smoke, and reassemble armor with numb efficiency. The helmet drops, visor clicks, and the world narrows without asking how rested you feel. It already knows the answer. You mount as the riders gather, forming ranks that look cohesive only from enough distance to blur individual exhaustion. Your own body lags behind the ceremonial crispness. Thighs ache from travel, shoulders remain tender under armor straps that never quite stop pressing. Expectations don't soften with fatigue, though. Historians still argue whether knights enjoyed any formal leave, but the rhythm of medieval service suggests rest unfolded largely when military demands happened not to collide with personal needs. The column moves out. You settle into another long ride that began without true preparation, your pulse quickening simply because order was given. As the road unwinds, irritation bubbles quietly beneath discipline. You think of delayed ledger entries and unrepaired tack waiting behind, all paused because duty now directs your attention elsewhere. 2 hours in, someone cracks a joke that knights must invent emergency boredom training to match emergency deployments. Joke number 1 lands dryly as chuckles scatter dust. The countryside changes the gentle fields, yielding to denser woods and uneven slopes. Travel slows. Narrow passes force riders into single file, tightening muscles as you keep formation. It all feels procedural rather than dramatic, but tension hums beneath routine. Wordless awareness heightens despite there being no visible threat. At a shallow crossroads, your column halts while scouts check routes ahead. You wait mounted. Time stretches. Horses shift weight. Your saddle begins biting into hip joints unrelentingly. Not dramatic pain, just unwavering discomfort that grinds endurance thin. Joke number 2 whispers to yourself, medieval yoga might consist entirely of hold this position indefinitely. Eventually, the scouts return. All clear. Riding resumes. Conversation never quite returns to full volume. Everyone's mind remains loosely locked into alert mode. By midday, you arrive at the border encampment, a collection of additional riders forming an expanded force summoned days earlier than you. No battle today, it seems. Presence alone is the immediate, objective demonstration of readiness, deterrence through visibility, more than violence. The mainstream historical reality resurfaces. Medieval warfare included lengthy periods of mobilization and posturing, with many musters ending without direct combat. You dismount stiffly and begin the familiar cycle of tending horse, adjusting armor, and eating quickly prepared rations. Someone mentions rumors of bandit concentrations edging too close to merchant routes. Another voices concern about a neighboring lord's troop movements being misinterpreted. Historians still argue how many medieval threat escalations were genuine precursors to battle versus diplomatic bluster amplified by rumor. Either way, uncertainty rules your days more reliably than conflict itself. Afternoon settles into low-stakes patrol assignments. You ride short perimeter routes, scanning hedgerows, bridges, and wooded bends. Mostly, you observe emptiness. Your mind relaxes precariously, then tightens again whenever distant movement catches your eye. A grazing deer triggering hand to sword reflex before embarrassment takes over. Joke number 3. You consider awarding the deer most convincing invading army performance. As sun drifts westward, nothing dramatic unfolds. Patrol ends. Horses are staked near camp edges to graze. Guards rotate watch shifts that promise half sleep punctuated by moments of forced attention. You draw second watch duty after nightfall. During your watch, lantern light casts golden puddles over trampled grass. Wind whispers along tree lines. Strain builds not from danger, but monotony maintaining high alert in low stimulus conditions taxes the mind. Your eyelids threaten rebellion. Historians still argue how soldiers preserved vigilance before caffeine was socially normalized. Cold water splashes, pacing drills, mental recitation of prayers all pass as possible techniques. You settle on pacing slow loops around the encampment, the repetitive movement anchoring wakefulness while your breath fogs faintly in chilled air. An owl hoots. Somewhere a horse nickers. Nothing else demands response for hours. When relief arrives, you feel small gratitude disproportionate to its act. Back in your tent, you collapse beside gear without fully undressing. You're too drained to unbuckle everything. Instead, you loosen only critical straps and lie tilted awkwardly across armor pieces like makeshift pillows. Sleep, when it comes, drops heavier than usual. You dream of horns again, not alarm bells, but impossible orchestral brass announcing obligations instead of danger. You try fleeing the sound on horseback, but find your horse moving in place, legs cycling uselessly without forward progress. Dawn pulls you from dreams without mercy. You refasten straps completely, stiffness already radiating from inadequate rest. Another muster day awaits. Perhaps rumors will fade, perhaps fresh orders will arrive. You don't know, and not knowing itself becomes the exhausting constant. Obligation replaces agency. You exist perpetually in readiness posture, your life shaped more by horns and heralds than personal will. In legends, knights charge into duty with eagerness. In lived reality, you rise into duty because the system expects no alternative. Your armor fits as tightly today as ever. You mount with the same practiced reluctance, and despite yesterday's hopes for a quiet leisure day, you ride again into uncertainty simply because someone higher up said, now. The morning stretches gently over the camp, pale golden sunlight spilling across tents and muddy paths, illuminating dew-soaked grass that glistens like tiny jewels. You awaken slowly, muscles and joints humming the quiet protest of yesterday's exertions, each movement reminding you of the life you inhabit, a life structured around routine, discipline, and enduring weight. The mainstream fact is clear. A night's day begins long before comfort or appetite. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, a constant reminder of both protection and effort. Historians still debate how standardized these morning routines were across regions and social ranks, but the strain of preparation is universal and grounding, a rhythm that carries the body even when the mind resists. Breakfast is simple and functional: a slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of preserved meat that seems determined to resist chewing, and cold, clear water from the stream nearby. Your squire fusses quietly with reins, stirrups, and saddlebags that never seem to stay perfectly aligned. You tighten gauntlets and straps, allowing a small, dry joke to surface: knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The ritual, though repetitive, provides an anchoring rhythm, a predictable pattern in a life otherwise filled with unpredictable terrain, weather, and minor mishaps. Armor assembly begins with the padded gambeson, snugly fitting against your torso, followed by chainmail that interlocks over arms and legs like a moving mosaic. Cuisses protect the thighs, greaves the shins, pauldrons rest on shoulders, and the breastplate locks over the chest. Finally, the helmet completes the ensemble, muffling sound slightly and enclosing your senses. Each buckle and strap presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort but signaling readiness. Humor drifts quietly. Imagining yourself as a medieval armored tortoise keeps the mind light. The rhythmic clinking of metal forms a strangely soothing auditory backdrop, almost like a gentle metronome marking the day's pace. Mounted, the column begins its journey across rolling fields, muddy tracks, and scattered woodland patches. Hooves strike mud and stones in steady rhythm, sending gentle jolts through legs and spine. Sweat collects beneath layers of armor, yet the constant motion fosters a surprising meditative calm. A quirky tidbit: knights sometimes carried small charms or herbs in their saddlebags, intended to provide reassurance, luck, or minor comfort. Historians still debate whether these had any tangible effect, but the psychological benefit alone is undeniable. By mid-morning, the path narrows into a dense woodland track. Branches scrape armor and helmet, forcing constant micro-adjustments in posture. A rabbit darts suddenly across the path, startling your horse and prompting reflexive muscle tension. Joke number 2 surfaces: small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, tension eases and the rhythm of riding resumes. Sunlight filters through the leaves, casting moving patterns on armor and ground, a soothing dance of light and shadow that draws your attention gently away from fatigue. By noon, the column pauses beside a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, feeling welcome relief as air brushes over sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance, just enough to maintain energy for the afternoon's journey. Conversation is sparse, focused on terrain or the occasional remark about the weather, giving the mind space to drift. Historians still debate whether morale was better maintained through structured dialogue or shared silence. Here, quiet is enough to soothe the spirit. The afternoon stretches long across hills and flatter paths, each movement requiring constant adjustment to balance on uneven ground and the subtle motions of the horse beneath you. Sweat and grime cling to your skin beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 3 drifts through your mind. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro-adjustments while barely moving. Repetition, though tiring, anchors both body and mind. With every mile, you feel the subtle satisfaction of steady progress, of rhythms maintained, and small, quiet victories achieved. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse over uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings profound relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but sustaining, and the gentle evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and damp earth. Sleep promises temporary reprieve, the day's exertion folding slowly into rest, leaving a sense of quiet accomplishment and calm. Here, amid ordinary toil and gentle repetition, you find the subtle satisfaction of endurance and the reassuring knowledge that tomorrow will bring another day of rhythm, repetition, and understated victory. Morning arrives with a slow insistence, the mist curling over the fields like indifferent ghosts. You awaken stiffly on the coarse straw of the camp cot, the remnants of yesterday's sweat clinging faintly to your skin. The mainstream fact that greets you immediately is that nights rarely enjoyed leisurely mornings. Sunrise is an alarm, a call to duty that never negotiates. You stretch with deliberate care, aware that every joint remembers yesterday's exertion and the day before that, all the way back through campaigns you can barely recount without wincing. Breakfast is functional rather than ceremonial. Bread hardened by time, a few scraps of dried meat, and water drawn from a nearby stream. The taste is bland, but necessary. Your squire hurries about, helping fellow knights refasten armor and preparing saddlebags for the day's journey. Historians still argue how consistent meal routines were across different regions, but in practice, mornings like this demanded efficiency over indulgence. Armor reassembly begins in methodical sequence. First, the padded gambeson, then chainmail, cuisses and greaves, and finally, the breastplate. Each strap tightened, each buckle clicked, adding familiar pressure to your body. You joke silently to yourself, number one. Knights, the original wearable weight training program. The metal settles over muscle and sinew, reinforcing the relentless presence of duty in every movement. Mounting your horse is another lesson in careful balance. Yesterday's rides have left your lower back tight, shoulders stiff, and hips complaining in muted tones. The reins rest heavy in your hands, and the leather saddle presses firmly against thighs already sore from the morning's exercises. Your horse shifts uneasily beneath you, reminding you that it too feels the weight of the day, both yours and its own. The road stretches ahead, rutted, uneven, and impossibly long. Villages punctuate the landscape like punctuation marks, each one brief, each one revealing only fleeting traces of human activity. Peasants wave from doorways or fields, some curious, some indifferent. You nod, helmeted face obscuring expression, and continue, comforted slightly by the routine, though it remains physically taxing. Joke number 2 emerges quietly. No applause, no parades, just mud appreciation. By late morning, the landscape shifts. Trees crowd the path, forcing careful maneuvering. Sunlight slices through branches, producing inconsistent patches of warmth. The armor absorbs some heat while trapping moisture beneath plates. A dual-edged companion to your exertions. You notice how quiet the world feels beyond the subtle shuffle of hooves and occasional bird call. Quirky tidbit. Some knights reportedly use small bells or tokens on saddlebags to track horse movement during forest rides, less for aesthetics than for reassurance in low visibility conditions. Whether this practice was widespread or rare remains debated. A minor hill challenges you physically. The slope demands extra effort from both horse and rider. You adjust posture, shift weight subtly, and urge your mount forward with practiced reinsmanship. Sweat dampens your neck beneath the helmet, and your breath comes in measured gasps. Historians still argue about the typical stamina of knights during extended marches. Anecdotal accounts suggest some could endure remarkable distances, though at significant personal cost. Your body silently attests to that cost. Midday arrives with sparse distraction. The distant horizon offers glimpses of rivers and scattered cottages, yet no relief. Your mind alternates between calculating progress, anticipating obstacles, and drifting into idle thoughts. A fellow knight comments on the monotony, suggesting a wager on which horse will notice a fox first. Joke number 3 lands with soft laughter, because nothing breaks tension like competitive woodland observation. As afternoon progresses, fatigue deepens. Muscles ache, sweat dries into salty streaks along skin, and armor plates creak faintly with each motion. You maintain rhythm regardless, balancing endurance, vigilance, and the subtle dance of horse and metal. Every hill, every rut, every obstacle reinforces the quiet understanding that this is not adventure. As ballads depict it, it is endurance in its most structured, demanding form. Approaching the intended stop, A small village appears. The horses slow instinctively, guided by familiarity with human settlements. You dismount with care, knees protesting, and assist your mount with reins and care. Armor removal is immediate upon settling in. Chainmail clatters softly onto canvas, greaves slip off, and pauldrons are stacked for later polishing. The relief is tangible, physical, and deeply satisfying. As you eat a modest meal and tend to horse and gear, the realization settles gently. Life as a knight is a cycle of physical exertion, minor victories, logistical puzzles, and disciplined routine. Glory may exist in tales, but here in practice, it is measured in endurance, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of surviving yet another day without mishap. And tomorrow, of course, the cycle resumes, indifferent to your weariness. By mid-morning, the camp stirs with the familiar rhythm of knights preparing for another day's maneuvering. You awaken stiffly, joints still tender from yesterday's march and last night's partial rest. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. A knight's body functions less like a flexible instrument of glory and more like a carefully engineered machine, prone to friction, fatigue, and occasional minor failure. Your armor hugs every curve and angle of muscle, reminding you with each movement of yesterday's exertion and today's obligations. Breakfast is hurried, bread and thin gruel providing minimal nourishment. Water is drawn from a nearby stream, cold and bracing. Your squire helps adjust armor pieces as they were yesterday gambeson first, then chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, and finally the breastplate. You joke silently. Number 1. Knights, self-inflicted boot camp enthusiasts since the Middle Ages. Each buckle click resonates with ritualistic inevitability, reinforcing the day's demands. Mounted, the column sets off again. Roads are rutted, occasionally muddy, occasionally rock-strewn. Your horse senses the terrain, adjusting gait and balance with uncanny intelligence. Yet every shift reminds your spine of previous fatigue. Historians still argue how far knights could travel in full armor without significant rest, with some records suggesting extreme endurance, while others emphasize attrition. Your personal experience leans toward attrition. Mid-morning brings a narrow woodland pass. Sunlight speckles the ground unevenly, and small animals dart between shadows. A rabbit scurries near the path, prompting a chuckle from one of your fellow riders. Joke number 2 surfaces. Nature's way of testing a knight's reflexes when already exhausted. You notice subtle smells: earthy moss, damp leaves, faint smoke from distant hearths, adding sensory detail that is both grounding and exhausting simultaneously. Crossing a shallow stream requires careful attention. Your horse hesitates briefly, hooves slipping on slick stones. The weight of armor and saddlebags amplifies the risk, and you adjust subtly, reminding yourself that survival often hinges on micro-movements rather than grand gestures. A quirky tidbit. Medieval manuals occasionally recommended distributing pack weight to preserve horse stamina, sometimes suggesting even scrolls or small chests be balanced carefully, a detail you now appreciate painfully. As noon approaches, the group halts for a brief rest. You dismount, stretching cautiously. Armor removal is partial. Gauntlets, helmet, and breastplate are removed to relieve pressure. Sweat cools rapidly, and your body sighs with relief. Others share bread and water, conversation limited to efficiency and observations of terrain. Historians still debate how long knights typically rested mid-march, but here, pragmatism dictates short pauses rather than leisurely meals. Patrolling small village outskirts, you notice signs of life children running barefoot, smoke curling from chimneys, carts clattering across cobblestones. A merchant gestures toward your group, and you nod politely, visor restricting expression but not intent. You recall the last discussion with your squire about minor social gestures during marches. Small civility gestures provide morale benefits, even if largely symbolic. The afternoon continues with uneven terrain, minor elevation changes, and constant vigilance. Your legs ache under chainmail, shoulder straps dig into fatigued muscle. Every shift, every turn, Every check on horse movement becomes a study in endurance. Joke number 3. You imagine nights raiding hills like modern marathoners, difficulty 7/10, moderately cruel. By late afternoon, the destination emerges a familiar outpost where supplies are stored and horses fed. Arrival is less celebratory than expected. You dismount with practiced caution, assist your mount, and begin armor removal immediately. Each layer removed feels like liberation. The sweat-streaked gambeson, dented greaves, and slightly scuffed pauldrons tell the story of another day endured rather than conquered. Evening settles in slowly. Campfires are lit. Conversations remain quiet, punctuated by occasional humor or sighs. You tend your horse, check armor, and prepare modest rations. A distant owl calls. Wind rustles nearby trees. Sleep will be brief and interrupted, but it promises temporary reprieve. You acknowledge that tomorrow, like every day, requires repetition, endurance, and subtle negotiation with fatigue, terrain, and obligations. In these quiet moments, you understand that the life of a knight balances between visible glory and unseen exertion. The stories celebrate heroism, but the reality emphasizes repetitive duty, physical stress, and constant readiness. Survival itself, day after day, becomes its own understated achievement. The following morning begins with the same measured inevitability that has become familiar. Mist clings stubbornly to the fields, and dew glistens along grass blades, dampening boots and leaving everything slightly heavier than it ought to be. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Nights rise not for leisure, but for ritualized readiness. Every dawn signals movement, vigilance, and the slow negotiation between human limits and metallic encumbrance. Breakfast is minimal. Hard bread, a few slices of jerky, and cold water suffice to fuel another day of travel. Your squire fusses with small items, reins, stirrups, and replacement straps. You accept the routine with silent tolerance, adjusting gauntlets and inspecting straps while considering the cumulative effect of repeated morning rituals. Historians still argue how essential these routines were versus how much they represented social performance. Either way, the repetition reinforces discipline. Armor reassembly follows the same sequence. Gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each piece presses against skin and muscle, reminding you that comfort is a minor luxury. Joke number 1 creeps in quietly. Knights, the original wearable obstacle course enthusiasts. Even the most minor adjustments feel like feats of concentration. Mounted, the column sets off across rolling hills and open fields. Hooves strike uneven terrain with predictable rhythm, muscles adjusting to absorb constant shocks. Sweat trickles beneath metal, but the combination of movement and mental focus distracts from monotony. You note, with some surprise, the subtle beauty of sunlight bouncing off distant tree lines, and yet the aesthetic appreciation coexists with physical weariness. Mid-morning brings the first minor challenge, a narrow woodland track, branches brushing helmet edges, uneven underfoot. You navigate carefully, shifting weight and guiding the horse, mindful that a single misstep could lead to minor injury at best, serious at worst. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights attach small bells to saddlebags or armor edges to track movement or ward off birds. Whether this was practical or merely ornamental remains debated, but the faint jingling adds a rhythm to the march that is both soothing and distracting. By noon, the column pauses near a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets to cool down. Breath clouds in the cool air, and your joints ache faintly but tolerably. Snack bread sustains energy levels, though satisfaction is secondary to function. Conversation among the knights is quiet, focused on terrain or minor observations rather than entertainment. Historians still debate whether communal morale in marches relied more on structured conversation or shared silence. Here, the latter dominates. Early afternoon carries on with steady rhythm. Hills and uneven paths alternate with flatter stretches. You adjust posture constantly, arms and legs learning to compensate for armored limitations. Joke number 2 whispers to yourself. Official nightly meditation, perfecting the art of micro-shift balance. Even mental humor serves as a small relief from the relentless physical demands. Eventually, a minor village comes into view, signaling temporary respite. You dismount with careful attention, assisting the horse across uneven ground. Armor removal is gradual, piece by piece. The familiar sense of relief follows. Skin breathing, muscles freed from constant tension, the world no longer filtered through metallic resistance. Evening brings routine. Feed horses, check gear, prepare modest meals. Conversations remain subdued, punctuated by laughter or anecdotes. The wind rustles leaves gently. The camp settles into the quiet rhythms of expectation and minor domesticity. Sleep promises a temporary reprieve, yet you know it will be brief, interrupted, and sometimes shallow. You acknowledge the pattern, each day a negotiation between duty, endurance, and small comforts. The life of a knight, in practice, is a balance of visible pageantry and invisible labor. Glory exists in legend. Reality favors repetition, careful attention, and endurance. Each day survived without major mishap becomes its own subtle victory, whispered rather than heralded. The morning light drifts softly over the camp, spilling pale gold across tents and muddy paths as you awaken to the familiar chorus of distant birds and the low rustle of leaves. Your body reminds you, ever so gently, of the exertions of the previous days. Muscles in your back and shoulders hum with quiet protest, and your joints complain in the subtle language of fatigue. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Knight's days began long before comfort, long before any leisurely meal. Armor waits nearby, heavy and unyielding, yet reassuring in its promise of protection. Historians still debate how strictly these morning routines were enforced across different regions, but the physical demands are undeniable. Breakfast is modest: a hard slab of bread, a thin piece of dried meat, and cold water from the stream nearby. Your squire fusses quietly with stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never seem to align perfectly. You tighten gauntlets and straps, letting a small, dry joke surface in your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. Despite its simplicity, the ritual provides rhythm, a familiar pattern in a life otherwise dominated by unpredictability, from muddy trails to shifting weather. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence. Padded gambeson first, then chainmail covering arms and legs like interwoven metal threads. Cuisses for your thighs, greaves for shins, pauldrons for shoulders, and breastplate across the chest. Finally, you settle the helmet over your head, muffling sounds slightly and enclosing your senses in the quiet weight of protection. Each buckle and strap presses against your muscles and skin, compressing comfort for readiness. Humor drifts faintly as a distraction. Imagining yourself as a mobile medieval fortress makes the weight feel oddly empowering. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a subtle, hypnotic soundtrack to the morning. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and wooded patches. Hooves strike mud and stones with a steady rhythm, transmitting gentle jolts through your legs and spine. Sweat collects beneath armor layers, yet the motion provides a slow, meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Knights sometimes carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still argue about the actual effects, but the ritual itself offers a gentle sense of control over the uncertainties of travel. By mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland. Branches scratch armor and helmet, requiring constant, subtle posture adjustments. A rabbit darts across the trail, causing your horse to flinch slightly, and you can't help but smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, tension eases, and the rhythm of travel resumes. Sunlight dances through leaves, casting shifting patterns on armor and earth, a quiet spectacle that invites calm reflection. By noon, the column pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, feeling a refreshing touch of air on sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide just enough sustenance to carry you through the afternoon. Conversation is sparse, focused on terrain and the occasional remark about travel conditions. Historians still debate whether silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, quiet is sufficient. You let your mind wander, noticing the soft sounds of water, birdsong, and distant wind through branches. Small sensory pleasures in an otherwise disciplined routine. The afternoon stretches across hills and flats, demanding constant attention to balance, saddle pressure, and subtle horse movements. Sweat and grime cling to your skin beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 drifts in softly. Nightly meditation, mastering micro-adjustments while barely moving. Despite the fatigue, the repetition of rhythm grounds both body and mind. Each mile brings a quiet satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment in simply maintaining pace, focus, and coordination. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings deep relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and a gentle evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Sleep promises a calm reprieve, the day's exertion folding into rest. Amid ordinary toil, subtle victories, and repeated rhythms, you find quiet satisfaction, the grounding reassurance of endurance, and the gentle promise of another day ahead. Morning arrives with its usual stealthy insistence. Dew clings stubbornly to tents and muddy paths, soaking boots and adding weight to already weary limbs. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. Nights rise early not for leisure, but because readiness is a non-negotiable obligation. You stretch carefully, muscles still tense from yesterday's rides, chainmail pressing against skin in a familiar, unyielding pattern. Historians still argue how early routine varied across regions, but here the rhythm is predictable. Rise, eat, armor, ride. Breakfast is functional stale bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with small adjustments, reins, stirrups, saddlebags slightly askew. You nod without enthusiasm, adjusting gauntlets, inspecting straps, and trying to ignore the cumulative aches already creeping into your spine and hips. Joke number 1 drifts into your mind. Knights, inventors of daily discomfort since the Dark Ages. Armor assembly proceeds in methodical sequence. Gambeson first, chainmail second, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet last. Each buckle click and metal alignment signals not glory, but survival, a ritual learned through repetition. The weight presses consistently, a reminder that mobility is always constrained, comfort optional. Mounted, the column moves along rolling fields, uneven terrain, and scattered woods. Hooves slap against mud and rocks with predictable rhythm, transmitting subtle jolts up through your spine and legs. Sweat collects beneath armor, but the movement itself is oddly meditative. You notice distant rivers glinting faintly under the sun, yet physical exertion dominates awareness. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs in saddlebags to ward off illness or bad luck, though effectiveness is debated. The ritual of carrying, however, comforts more than it protects. Mid-morning, the group narrows into a woodland path. Branches scratch helmets and pauldrons. You shift weight continuously, guiding the horse carefully. A startled rabbit sends the horse into a tiny lurch. Joke number 2 surfaces. Nature's surprise obstacle course, sponsored by small mammals. The horse recovers quickly, but your own muscles tense reflexively. By noon, you pause beside a shallow stream. Horses drink. You remove helmet and gauntlets. Bread sustains energy. Conversation is minimal, mainly focused on terrain and minor observations. Historians still argue how much communal morale depended on conversation versus shared silence, but here the latter seems sufficient to maintain order. Afternoon brings alternating hills and flatter stretches. You shift constantly to compensate for uneven ground, armor weight, and saddle positioning. Sweat and grime mix under metal, forming a constant reminder of effort. Joke number 3 drifts in. Official nightly meditation, mastering the micro adjustments of endurance. The repetition is exhausting, yet strangely grounding. Eventually, the column reaches a small village, signaling temporary respite. You dismount, assisting your horse with careful guidance. Armor removal begins gradually. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail. Relief is immediate and tangible. Even modest freedom from metal feels like a reward earned. Campfires ignite, meals are simple but sustaining, and the wind whispers through trees as evening draws in. Sleep approaches, though fragmented by ongoing patrols, distant animal movements, and the anticipation of tomorrow's obligations. The day concludes as it began, balancing endurance, labor, minor pleasures, and subtle, quiet victories that rarely earn song or herald. Dawn nudges the camp awake with its pale, insistent fingers. The air is damp, scenting boots and leather with wet earth and faint smoke. The mainstream fact emerges immediately. A knight's morning is a ritualized blend of necessity and endurance, and you have little choice in the matter. Muscles protest yesterday's exertions, chainmail bites at familiar pressure points, and your spine hums with preemptive stiffness. Historians still argue how variable morning routines were across different regions, yet here, the rhythm is unyielding. Rise, eat, assemble armor, mount, march. Breakfast is minimal and functional. Hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water from a nearby stream. Your squire fusses with small details: reins, stirrups, saddlebags that resist perfect alignment. You adjust gauntlets and inspect straps, joking silently, number 1. Knights, early adopters of wearable weight training. The ritual of preparation, though tedious, lends a rhythm to the morning, a structure the body can anticipate. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence: gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each buckle click and metallic shift signals readiness. The weight compresses your muscles, reminding you that comfort is optional and survival mandatory. Humor drifts faintly to the back of your mind, a small distraction from physical strain. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and scattered woodlands. Hooves slap mud and rocks in predictable rhythm, jolting muscles and spine with each step. Sweat collects beneath armor, soaking fabric layers, yet movement itself has a hypnotic quality. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried herbs or small charms tucked in saddlebags, intended to ward off illness or misfortune. Whether effective or merely symbolic remains debated, but the ritual offers minor psychological comfort. Mid-morning, a narrow woodland path forces careful navigation. Branches scratch armor, requiring constant micro-adjustments in posture. A rabbit darts into view, startling your horse. Joke number 2 surfaces. Wildlife obstacle courses, medieval edition. Reflexes snap into action, muscles tightening, then releasing once the animal disappears. By noon, the group pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, appreciating fleeting relief. Bread and cold water provide modest energy. Conversation is limited, focused on terrain and minor observations. Historians still argue whether morale relied more on discussion or shared silence, but here, quiet dominates. Afternoon stretches with alternating hills and flats. Constant shifts in weight compensate for uneven terrain and saddle pressure. Sweat and grime accumulate under metal, a persistent reminder of exertion. Joke number 3. Official nightly meditation, mastering the art of micro shifts. The repetition is exhausting yet grounding, a rhythm of body and mind. Eventually, a small village comes into view. You dismount, assist your horse, and begin the gradual removal of armor. Relief floods, muscles, and skin alike. Campfires ignite, simple meals sustain, and the wind rustles gently as evening settles. Sleep, though brief and interrupted by patrols or animal movements, promises temporary reprieve. The day concludes as always, balancing endurance, labor, and quiet victories, rarely recorded in ballads. Morning creeps across the camp in muted gold, brushing tents and muddy paths with slow insistence. You wake stiffly, every joint whispering reminders of yesterday's exertions. The mainstream fact is clear. Nights rise not for leisure, but because duty brooks no delay. Armor presses against skin like a loyal, slightly tyrannical companion, and every movement feels both necessary and mildly oppressive. Historians still argue how early routines varied across regions, but here the rhythm remains predictable. Wake, eat, assemble armor, mount, ride. Breakfast is functional and spare. Hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with small adjustments, reins, stirrups, and saddlebags persistently shifting despite his best efforts. You nod, adjusting straps and gauntlets, silently amused. Joke number 1 drifts in. Knights, early enthusiasts of wearable weight training and extreme discomfort. Armor assembly proceeds in the familiar sequence. Gambeson first, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, and finally helmet. Each buckle click is a small testament to readiness. Weight settles across shoulders and torso, muscles coiling to accommodate restriction, breath rhythmically adjusting. Humor flits faintly to the back of your mind, a quiet distraction from monotony and strain. Mounted, the column moves across rolling hills, muddy tracks, and scattered woodland patches. Hooves strike with predictable rhythm, sending subtle jolts up through spine and legs. Sweat forms beneath armor layers, but movement offers a meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs for perceived health or luck benefits. Effectiveness remains debated, but the ritual itself comforts. Mid-morning, you enter a narrow woodland pass. Branches scratch helmet and pauldrons, forcing constant posture micro-adjustments. A sudden rustle, a startled rabbit elicits reflexive tightening of muscles. Joke number 2 surfaces. Medieval obstacle courses sponsored by small woodland mammals. Your horse recovers quickly, yet you remain alert, balancing awareness with exhaustion. By noon, the group halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink, and you remove helmet and gauntlets, welcoming the brief relief. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance. Conversation remains sparse, focused on terrain and logistical details. Historians still debate how crucial these interactions were to morale, but quiet appears sufficient here. Afternoon stretches across alternating hills and flats. Your body shifts constantly to maintain balance under saddle and armor weight. Sweat and grime accumulate beneath metal, a tactile reminder of exertion. Joke number 3 drifts in. Meditation through micro-adjustments. Night edition. The repetition, though taxing, fosters a rhythm both exhausting and oddly grounding. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount, assist your horse, and begin gradual armor removal. Relief is profound. Muscles breathe, skin cools, and the day's exertion finds temporary respite. Campfires ignite, simple meals nourish, and the wind rustles through trees. Sleep promises a brief but necessary reprieve, leaving you poised to repeat the cycle tomorrow. The sun rises slowly, scattering pale light across the dew-soaked camp. You awaken with a familiar ache threading through your shoulders, back, and hips. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. Life as a knight begins long before comfort or appetite, each day dictated by obligation and the persistent weight of armor. You stretch cautiously, mindful of yesterday's rides and the lingering tension in your joints. Historians still debate the exact endurance expected of knights during extended campaigns, but the physical toll is indisputable. Breakfast is simple and functional: hardened bread, a slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fidgets with gear reins, stirrups, and leather saddlebags resistant to perfect alignment. You adjust straps and inspect armor while thinking quietly to yourself. Joke number 1 surfaces. Knights, medieval pioneers of wearable misery. The ritual, though repetitive, provides the mind and body a predictable rhythm. which in its own way is comforting. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence: padded gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, and helmet. Each piece presses against muscles and skin, compressing and limiting freedom, yet offering the only protection deemed acceptable by feudal standards. Humor flits in as a subtle distraction from the physical strain. Mounted, the column proceeds through rolling fields, uneven paths, and occasional patches of woodland. Hooves strike mud and rock rhythmically, jolting the rider subtly with each step. Sweat forms beneath armor layers, and yet the movement provides a hypnotic cadence. A quirky tidbit arises. Knights sometimes carried small charms or medicinal herbs tucked in saddlebags for morale or perceived protection. Effectiveness debated, but ritual comforting. Mid-morning, the road narrows into a forested track. Branches scratch helmet and pauldrons, demanding continuous posture adjustments. A startled squirrel leaps from underbrush, prompting a reflexive nudge of your horse. Joke number 2. The tiny woodland fauna, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Muscles tense, then relax as both horse and rider regain rhythm. By noon, the group pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, appreciating fleeting relief. Bread and water provide minimal energy, conversation limited to tactical or logistical observation. Historians still debate how essential these interactions were for maintaining morale. In this setting, shared silence dominates. Afternoon is long and unvaried. Hills and flatter stretches alternate, requiring constant adjustments to saddle and armor weight. Sweat and grime cling beneath the metal, reminding you of exertion's persistence. Joke number 3 surfaces: official nightly meditation, perfecting micro adjustments under duress. The repetition, though exhausting, establishes a rhythm that steadies the mind and body simultaneously. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings relief: gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted away from skin. The sensation is liberating. Campfires ignite, meals are simple but sustaining, and wind rustles the trees. Sleep promises a brief, though interrupted, reprieve. The day's exertion, endurance, and subtle victories form a quiet undercurrent, rarely heralded but deeply felt. The morning arrives with soft, pale light spilling over the camp, brushing tents and muddy paths with a gentle glow. You awaken slowly, muscles and joints humming reminders of previous exertions. The mainstream fact is simple: a night's day begins with preparation long before comfort or appetite. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, a companion that is both protection and challenge. Historians still debate how uniform morning routines were across regions and ranks, but the physical demands remain constant, a daily exercise in patience and endurance. Breakfast is modest: hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water drawn from the nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never seem to align perfectly. You tighten straps and gauntlets, allowing a small, dry joke to drift through your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The ritual, though repetitive, establishes a comforting rhythm, a predictable pattern in a life otherwise governed by uneven terrain and unpredictable weather. Armor assembly follows its familiar order. You slide into the padded gambeson, the quilted layers pressing snugly against your torso. Chainmail interlocks over arms and legs, heavy yet flexible. Cuisses cover thighs. Greaves protect shins. Pauldrons rest gently on shoulders. And finally, the breastplate locks in place. The helmet settles over your head, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in quiet weight. Each buckle presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort for readiness. Humor drifts faintly. Imagining yourself as a mobile medieval fortress provides a light-hearted mental escape. The rhythmic clinking of metal forms a gentle, meditative soundtrack, marking the start of the day. Mounted, the column advances across rolling fields and scattered woodland paths. Hooves strike mud and stone with predictable rhythm, sending subtle jolts through legs and spine. Sweat collects beneath armor, yet the movement carries a hypnotic, meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these items, but the ritual itself offers a small, grounding sense of control over the uncertainties of travel. Mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland. Branches brush against helmet and pauldrons, requiring constant micro-adjustments in posture. A rabbit darts across the path, startling your horse momentarily, and you can't help but smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, the tension eases and the rhythmic cadence of travel returns. Sunlight filters through leaves, casting soft, moving patterns on armor and ground, a gentle spectacle for wandering attention. By noon, the group pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the cool touch of air on sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide simple sustenance. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain or travel conditions. Historians still debate whether silence or structured dialogue better preserved morale. Here, quiet suffices. You let your mind drift, taking in the subtle sounds of water, birdsong, and rustling leaves, small pleasures in an otherwise disciplined routine. The afternoon stretches across rolling hills and flat fields. You shift weight continuously, compensating for uneven ground and subtle movements of your horse. Sweat and grime cling to your skin beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance. Joke number 2 surfaces softly. Nightly meditation, mastering micro adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, repetition anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the simple joy of rhythm and steady progress. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Armor removal is deeply relieving. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly, meals are simple but nourishing, and a gentle evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Sleep promises calm respite, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and subtle victories, you find quiet satisfaction and the grounding reassurance of endurance, ready for the next day's journey. The camp awakens to a sky still tinged with gray, dew-soaking tints and the earth beneath your boots. You stretch carefully, muscles reminding you of yesterday's exertions, chainmail pressing against familiar sore spots. The mainstream fact is inescapable. Knights rise to duty before comfort, assembling armor and mounting for another day of relentless movement. Historians still debate whether this early morning rigor varied significantly across regions, yet the physical strain remains universal. Breakfast is modest: hardened bread, a sliver of dried meat, and cold water from a nearby stream. Your squire fusses with minor adjustments to saddlebags, stirrups, and reins. You tighten gauntlets and check straps, silently amused. Joke number 1 drifts in. Knights, pioneers of wearable inconvenience and early morning micro-strain training. Armor assembly follows its familiar pattern: padded gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, and helmet. Each buckle and strap reinforces readiness at the expense of comfort. Humor surfaces as a quiet companion, a distraction from repetitive strain. The sound of metal clicking against metal forms a hypnotic backdrop. Mounted, the column advances over rolling hills and patchy woodlands. Hooves strike mud and rocks, transmitting subtle jolts up legs and spine. Sweat collects beneath armor, yet the rhythm of movement is oddly meditative. A quirky tidbit emerges. Knights sometimes carried small charms or herbs tucked into saddlebags for health or luck. Whether they truly worked is debated, but the ritual itself is comforting. Mid-morning, the route narrows into a dense woodland track. Branches scrape against armor and helmet, forcing micro-adjustments in posture. A rabbit darts suddenly, startling your horse and prompting reflexive muscle tightening. Joke number 2. Small woodland fauna, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. As the animal disappears, tension eases and rhythm resumes. By noon, the column halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying brief relief. Bread and water provide minimal energy. Conversation remains sparse, focused on terrain. Historians still debate the relative importance of silence versus dialogue for morale, but quiet seems sufficient here. Afternoon is a slow alternation of hills and flat stretches. You constantly adjust posture to compensate for saddle and armor weight. Sweat and grime accumulate beneath metal, a tactile reminder of exertion. Joke number 3 surfaces. Official night meditation, mastering micro shifts while barely moving. The repetition is exhausting yet strangely grounding. Eventually, the column approaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse. Gradual armor removal brings relief, gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires are lit, meals are simple, and wind rustles through trees. Sleep promises brief reprieve, leaving you poised for another day of endurance, duty, and subtle, quiet victories. Dawn seeps slowly across the camp, painting tents and muddy paths in pale gold. You awaken to familiar stiffness threading through shoulders, back, and hips. The mainstream fact remains: nights rise long before comfort or appetite, beginning each day with preparation, armor, and mounting for marches that test both body and mind. Historians still debate the consistency of morning routines across regions, but physical strain remains universal. Breakfast is simple: hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with reins, stirrups, and saddlebags. You adjust gauntlets and check straps, silently amused. Joke number 1 drifts in. Knights, medieval enthusiasts of wearable misery and micro-strain training. Armor assembly follows its usual sequence: gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each buckle and strap compresses muscles and skin, offering protection but limiting comfort. Humor surfaces as a mental diversion from physical strain. The rhythmic clatter of metal provides a hypnotic accompaniment to your thoughts. Mounted, the column advances across rolling fields and scattered woods. Hooves strike mud and stones, transmitting subtle jolts up legs and spine. Sweat collects beneath armor layers, yet movement maintains a meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit: some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags, believed to ward off illness or misfortune. Their effectiveness remains debated, but the ritual offers psychological comfort. Mid-morning brings a narrow woodland track. Branches scratch helmet and pauldrons, demanding continuous posture adjustments. A startled squirrel causes your horse to flinch. Joke number 2 surfaces. Small woodland creatures, unofficial night reflex trainers. Muscle tension relaxes once the animal disappears and rhythm returns. By noon, the group halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying a fleeting relief. Bread and water sustain energy. Conversation is minimal, focusing on terrain observation. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, silence suffices. Afternoon alternates between hills and flat stretches. You shift weight constantly to compensate for uneven terrain and saddle pressure. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, a tactile reminder of exertion. Joke number 3. Nightly meditation, mastering micro adjustments under duress. Despite fatigue, rhythm anchors body and mind. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount, assisting your horse. Gradual armor removal brings profound relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires ignite. Meals are simple but sustaining, and the wind rustles through trees. Sleep promises temporary reprieve. The day closes with quiet endurance, subtle victories, and repetition that defines the life of a knight. Morning drifts lazily over the camp, pale light stretching across tense and muddy paths. You awaken to familiar stiffness threading through shoulders, back, and hips. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. Nights rise not for leisure, but for the unyielding rhythm of duty. Armor presses against your body like an insistently loyal companion, and muscles hum in quiet protest. Historians still debate regional variations in early morning routines, yet the physical strain is universal. Breakfast is sparse and functional. Hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with minor adjustments, reins, stirrups, saddlebags resistant to perfect alignment. You adjust straps and gauntlets, a quiet joke forming. Number 1, knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of these morning rituals provides rhythm and, in its own way, comfort. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence. Padded gambeson first, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet last. Each buckle click and metallic shift signals readiness at the expense of comfort. Humor flits quietly to distract from monotony and strain, a small mental reprieve. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and scattered woodland patches. Hooves strike mud and rocks with steady rhythm, transmitting subtle jolts up spine and legs. Sweat forms beneath armor layers, yet movement creates a meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit arises. Some knights carried small charms or medicinal herbs in saddlebags to ward off illness or misfortune. Effectiveness remains debated, but ritualistic reassurance is evident. Mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland. Branches scratch armor and helmet, demanding continuous posture micro-adjustments. A rabbit darts unexpectedly, startling your horse and prompting reflexive tightening of muscles. Joke number 2 surfaces. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Muscles relax once the animal disappears, rhythm restored. By noon, the column halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying a brief relief. Bread and water provide modest energy. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain observation. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue best maintain morale. Here, quiet suffices. Afternoon brings a mix of hills and flat stretches. You adjust posture constantly, compensating for saddle and armor weight. Sweat and grime cling beneath metal, a tactile reminder of exertion. Joke number 3 drifts in. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro-adjustments under duress. The repetition, though exhausting, establishes a rhythm both grounding and hypnotic. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse. Gradual armor removal brings relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires ignite, simple meals sustain, and wind whispers through trees. Sleep promises a brief reprieve. Another day closes, defined by endurance, repetition, and quiet, understated victories. The day begins slowly, the sun rising with gentle insistence across dew-laden tents and muddy pathways. You awaken with familiar stiffness threading through shoulders, back, and hips. The mainstream fact is clear. Nights rise to duty before comfort, their mornings dictated by ritualized preparation and the persistent weight of armor. Muscles hum faintly in protest, a subtle reminder of yesterday's exertions. Historians still debate how strictly morning routines varied across regions, but physical strain remains consistent. Breakfast is minimal hard bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with minor adjustments, reins, stirrups, and saddlebags that seem forever misaligned. You tighten gauntlets and check straps, humor creeping quietly into thought. Joke number 1 surfaces. Knights, early adopters of wearable discomfort and endurance training. Armor assembly proceeds in its usual order. Gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each buckle click presses against muscles and skin, signaling readiness and compressing comfort into a secondary concern. Humor surfaces subtly, a distraction from the monotony and strain. The soft clinking of metal becomes oddly meditative. Mounted, The column traverses rolling fields, uneven tracks, and scattered woods. Hooves strike mud and stones rhythmically, jolting the rider's spine and legs. Sweat collects beneath armor layers, yet the movement itself maintains a hypnotic cadence. A quirky tidbit. Some knights carried charms or small herbs tucked in saddlebags, believed to ward off illness or misfortune. Historians still argue their effectiveness, but the ritual offers minor psychological reassurance. Mid-morning, the route narrows into a dense woodland path. Branches scrape armor and helmet, forcing constant posture adjustments. A startled squirrel causes the horse to flinch, and reflexively, muscles tighten. Joke number 2. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Tension eases as the animal disappears, rhythm restored. By noon, the column pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying fleeting relief. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance. Conversation is sparse, focused on terrain and minor observations. Historians still debate whether morale relied more on discussion or shared silence. Here, quiet dominates. Afternoon unfolds with a mix of hills and flatter stretches. You shift weight constantly to accommodate uneven terrain and saddle pressure. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, a tactile reminder of exertion. Joke number 3 drifts in. Nightly meditation, mastering micro-adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetition fosters grounding and rhythm. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings profound relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires ignite, meals are simple, and the wind rustles gently through trees. Sleep promises temporary reprieve, another day closed with endurance, repetition, and quiet, subtle victories. The morning stretches lazily across the camp, the soft light of dawn brushing tents and muddy paths in a warm, golden hue. You awaken slowly, muscles and joints humming with the memory of previous exertions, and you can already feel the subtle aches along shoulders and back that come from armor and long hours in the saddle. The mainstream fact is clear. Night stays began long before comfort, long before leisurely meals. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, both a shield and a constant companion. Historians still debate how strictly these morning routines were followed across regions and social ranks, but the physical demands were universal, and the rhythm of preparation was both grounding and inescapable. Breakfast is simple, functional, a hardened slab of bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cool water drawn from a nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never quite align perfectly. You tighten gauntlets and straps, letting a small, wry joke drift through your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of this morning ritual, though mundane, provides rhythm, a predictable pattern in a life otherwise governed by shifting terrain and variable weather. Armor assembly begins with a padded gambeson snugly hugging your torso, followed by chainmail interlocking across arms and legs like living metal threads. Cuisses cover the thighs, greaves protect the shins, pauldrons settle over shoulders, and the breastplate locks over your chest. Finally, the helmet comes down, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in the familiar weight of readiness. Each buckle presses against skin and muscles, compressing comfort for the sake of protection. Humor drifts faintly, imagining yourself as a moving, armored fortress adds a gentle lightness to the otherwise heavy routine. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a soothing auditory backdrop, a metronome marking the day's start. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and occasional woodland paths. Hooves strike mud and stones in steady rhythm, sending gentle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath armor, but the movement provides a calm, meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Knights sometimes carried small charms or herbs tucked in their saddlebags, meant for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate their practical effect. but the ritual itself lends a quiet sense of control over the uncertainties of the road. By mid-morning, the path narrows into a dense woodland track, branches brush helmet and pauldrons, requiring subtle, constant adjustments in posture. A rabbit scurries across the trail, startling your horse momentarily, and you can't help but smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal vanishes, tension eases, and the rhythm of riding resumes. Sunlight filters through leaves, casting soft, moving shadows across armor and ground, a gentle spectacle that invites calm reflection. By noon, the column pauses beside a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the refreshing touch of air on sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance, enough to maintain energy for the afternoon. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain or small observations about travel. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, quiet is enough to soothe the mind. You let your senses wander over the soft sounds of water, birdsong, and rustling leaves, appreciating the subtle pleasures of a simple day. The afternoon stretches across undulating hills and flat fields. You shift weight continuously to balance on uneven ground and accommodate the subtle movements of your horse. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 drifts in softly. Nightly meditation, perfecting tiny adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetition anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the gentle joy of rhythm, steady progress, and subtle victories that no one else will notice, but that you can feel fully. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings profound relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and the evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Sleep promises a calm reprieve, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and quiet victories, you find gentle satisfaction, the subtle reassurance of endurance, and the comforting knowledge that tomorrow brings another day to move, adapt, and persist. The morning light filters through misty air, brushing tents and muddy paths with muted gold. You awaken stiffly, muscles and joints whispering reminders of yesterday's exertions. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. A night's day begins with ritualized duty long before comfort or appetite, armor pressing insistently against skin and muscle. Historians still debate variations in early routines across regions, yet the physical strain remains constant. Breakfast is functional. Hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with minor adjustments, reins, stirrups, and perpetually shifting saddlebags. You tighten gauntlets, adjust straps, and silently joke number 1. Knights, early adopters of wearable discomfort and endurance training. The repetition, though tedious, provides rhythm and expectation. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence. Gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each buckle click compresses muscles and skin, signaling readiness at the expense of comfort. Humor drifts quietly in the background, a distraction from monotony. The rhythmic clinking of metal forms a gentle auditory anchor. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and uneven woodland tracks. Hooves strike mud and rocks with predictable rhythm, sending subtle jolts up spine and legs. Sweat forms beneath armor layers, yet movement provides a meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit. Some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags, intended to ward off illness or misfortune. Historians debate their effectiveness, but the ritual offers reassurance. Mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland. Branches scratch armor and helmet, requiring constant posture micro-adjustments. A startled rabbit causes your horse to flinch, reflexive muscles tightening. Joke number 2. Small woodland creatures, unofficial night reflex trainers. As the animal disappears, rhythm resumes. By noon, the group halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying fleeting relief. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance. Conversation is sparse, focused on terrain. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better maintained morale. Here, quiet suffices. Afternoon alternates hills and flatter stretches. You shift weight continuously to accommodate uneven terrain and saddle pressure. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of exertion. Joke number 3 surfaces. Official night meditation, mastering micro adjustments under duress. The repetition, though exhausting, establishes a grounding rhythm for both body and mind. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse. Gradual armor removal brings relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires are lit, meals simple but sustaining, and wind rustles gently through trees. Sleep promises temporary reprieve, closing another day, marked by endurance, repetition, and subtle, quiet victories. The morning light arrives slowly over the camp, casting a warm glow on tents, muddy paths, and the scattered equipment of the day ahead. You awaken gradually, muscles and joints humming with the memory of yesterday's exertions. The mainstream fact is clear. A night's day begins with preparation and attention to routine, long before comfort or leisurely meals. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, a companion that offers protection and shapes the rhythm of your body. Historians still debate how strictly these morning routines were followed in different regions, but the physical demands are universal, and the rhythm of preparation is a grounding constant. Breakfast is simple, practical, and modest. A slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of preserved meat, and cold water from a nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting reins, stirrups, and saddlebags that never seem perfectly aligned. You tighten straps and gauntlets, letting a small, wry joke surface in your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of this morning ritual provides a familiar cadence in a life otherwise governed by unpredictable terrain and shifting weather. Armor assembly follows its practice sequence. You slide into the padded gambeson, quilted layers pressing snugly against your torso. Chainmail interlocks across arms and legs like living metal threads. Cuisses cover the thighs, greaves protect the shins, pauldrons rest lightly on shoulders, and finally, the breastplate locks into place. The helmet settles over your head, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in the reassuring weight of readiness. Each buckle presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort for the sake of protection. Humor drifts faintly. Imagining yourself as a moving fortress lightens the mental load. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a soothing auditory backdrop, almost like a gentle metronome marking the start of the day. Mounted, the column begins its journey across rolling fields, shallow streams, and scattered woodland patches. Hooves strike mud and stones in steady rhythm, sending gentle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath layers, yet movement brings a subtle meditative calm. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags, intended for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate their practical effects, but the ritual itself provides a small, grounding sense of control over the uncertainties of travel. By mid-morning, the path narrows into a shaded woodland track. Branches brush helmet and pauldrons, forcing tiny, constant posture adjustments. A rabbit scurries across the trail, startling your horse momentarily, and you smile quietly. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, tension eases, and the rhythm of riding resumes. Sunlight filters through leaves, casting moving patterns across armor and earth, a quiet spectacle that invites gentle attention. By noon, the group pauses beside a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, feeling the cool air against sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide simple sustenance. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain or weather. giving your mind space to drift. Historians still debate whether silence or structured dialogue better maintained morale. Here, quiet is sufficient. You notice the subtle sounds of water, birdsong, and wind through branches, appreciating the small pleasures in an otherwise disciplined routine. The afternoon stretches across rolling hills and flat fields. You shift weight subtly to balance on uneven ground and adapt to the horse's movements. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 drifts in softly. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro-adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetitive rhythm anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the subtle joy of rhythm, steady progress, and understated victories that only you can feel. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount with care, assisting your horse over uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and the evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Sleep promises calm respite, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and quiet victories, you find gentle satisfaction, the comforting reassurance of endurance, and the subtle promise of another day ahead. The morning rises slowly, mist still clinging to tents and muddy pathways. You awaken with familiar stiffness, muscles and joints humming reminders of yesterday's exertions. The mainstream fact is unavoidable. Nights begin each day with duty, long before comfort or appetite. Armor presses insistently against skin and muscle, a persistent companion that tempers movement. Historians still debate regional variations in morning routines, yet the physical strain remains constant across campaigns. Breakfast is functional and minimal: hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water. Your squire fusses with reins, stirrups, and stubbornly misaligned saddlebags. You adjust straps and tighten gauntlets, quietly thinking joke number 1. Knights, the original wearable endurance enthusiasts. The ritual, though repetitive, provides rhythm your body has come to anticipate, however grudgingly. Armor assembly follows the usual sequence: gambeson, chainmail, cuisses, greaves, pauldrons, breastplate, helmet. Each buckle click presses against muscles and skin, signaling readiness at the expense of comfort. Humor surfaces faintly as a distraction from monotony and strain. The rhythmic clinking of metal forms a strangely soothing soundtrack. Mounted, the column moves over rolling fields, muddy tracks, and scattered woodlands. Hooves strike mud and rocks in steady rhythm, transmitting subtle jolts up spine and legs. Sweat collects beneath armor, yet movement carries a hypnotic, meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit: some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked in saddlebags, believed to ward off illness or misfortune. Effectiveness is debated, but ritual comfort is tangible. Mid-morning, the path narrows into a dense woodland track. Branches scratch helmet and pauldrons, forcing continuous posture adjustments. A startled rabbit sends your horse into a minor lurch, muscles tightening reflexively. Joke number 2 surfaces: small woodland creatures, unofficial night reflex trainers. As tension eases, rhythm returns. By noon, the group halts at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying brief relief. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance. Conversation remains sparse, focused on terrain observation. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better maintained morale. Here, quiet suffices. Afternoon stretches with alternating hills and flat stretches. You shift weight constantly to accommodate uneven terrain and saddle pressure. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of exertion. Joke number 3 drifts in: official night meditation, perfecting micro-adjustments under duress. Repetition, though exhausting, anchors body and mind in steady rhythm. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, chainmail lifted from skin. Campfires are lit, meals simple but sustaining, and the wind rustles gently. Sleep promises temporary reprieve, closing another day defined by endurance, repetition, and quiet, subtle victories. The morning stretches gently over the camp, soft sunlight filtering through the leaves and brushing tents, muddy paths, and scattered gear with a warm, comforting glow. You awaken slowly, each muscle and joint humming the quiet reminder of previous exertions, a gentle ache that is both familiar and oddly reassuring. The mainstream fact is clear. A night's stay begins long before comfort or leisure. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, offering protection and shaping the rhythm of your body. Historians still debate the uniformity of these morning routines across regions, but the demands of preparation remain constant, providing structure to the otherwise unpredictable life of travel and duty. Breakfast is modest but sufficient. A slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of preserved meat, and cold water from the nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never seem perfectly aligned. You tighten gauntlets and straps, letting a small wry joke drift into your thoughts. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of this ritual, though mundane, establishes a comforting rhythm in a life otherwise governed by the whims of terrain, weather, and the slow pace of a column of riders. Armor assembly follows the familiar, methodical order. You slide into the padded gambeson, quilted layers pressing snugly against your torso. Chainmail interlocks across arms and legs, providing both protection and subtle weight. Cuisses cover thighs, greaves protect shins, pauldrons rest lightly on shoulders, and the breastplate locks securely over your chest. Finally, the helmet settles over your head, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in the gentle weight of readiness. Each buckle presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort for the sake of protection. Humor drifts faintly through your mind. Imagining yourself as a moving, armored fortress lightens the load and keeps your spirits up. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a subtle, hypnotic soundtrack, a steady pulse marking the day's start. Mounted, the column moves across gently rolling fields and scattered woodland paths. Hooves strike mud and stones with predictable rhythm, transmitting gentle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath armor, yet the movement carries a calming, meditative cadence. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked into saddlebags for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate their effectiveness, but the ritual itself provides a gentle sense of control amid the uncertainties of travel. Mid-morning, the path narrows into dense woodland, branches, brush helmet, and pauldrons requiring subtle, constant posture adjustments. A rabbit darts across the trail, prompting your horse to flinch slightly, and you can't help but smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, tension eases, and the rhythm of riding resumes. Sunlight dances through leaves, casting shifting patterns on armor and ground, a gentle spectacle that draws your attention and quiets your mind. By noon, the column pauses beside a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the cool touch of air against sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide simple sustenance. Conversation is minimal, focused on the landscape or subtle details of the terrain. Historians still debate whether silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, quiet suffices. You let your senses wander over the soft sounds of water, birdsong, and leaves rustling in the wind, small pleasures grounding you in the present. The afternoon stretches across rolling hills and flat fields. You shift weight constantly, compensating for uneven ground and the horse's subtle movements. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 surfaces gently. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro-adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetitive rhythm anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the gentle joy of rhythm, steady progress, and understated victories that only you fully feel. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount with care, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings deep relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and the evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Sleep promises calm respite, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and quiet victories, you find subtle satisfaction and the gentle reassurance of endurance, ready for the next day's journey. The morning light drifts softly over the camp, brushing tents, muddy paths, and scattered equipment with a warm, comforting glow. You awaken slowly, your muscles and joints humming with the memory of previous exertions. Each movement a gentle reminder of the body's ongoing work. The mainstream fact is clear. A night's day begins long before comfort or leisure. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, both a shield and a companion, shaping the rhythm of your body. Historians still debate how standardized morning routines were across regions and ranks, but the physical demands are constant, offering structure in an otherwise unpredictable life. Breakfast is modest and practical: a slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of preserved meat, and cold water from the nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never seem perfectly aligned. You tighten straps and gauntlets, letting a small, dry joke surface. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of this ritual establishes a comforting cadence in a life otherwise shaped by uneven terrain and changing weather. Armor assembly follows a careful, methodical sequence. You slide into the padded gambeson, quilted layers pressing snugly against your torso. Chainmail interlocks across arms and legs, providing flexible protection. Cuisses cover thighs, greaves protect shins, pauldrons rest lightly on shoulders, and the breastplate locks securely over the chest. Finally, the helmet settles over your head, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in the reassuring weight of readiness. Each buckle presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort for protection. Humor drifts lightly through your mind. Imagining yourself as a mobile fortress keeps the heavy ritual mentally lighter. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a meditative soundtrack, marking the start of the day. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and scattered woodland tracks. Hooves strike mud and stones in steady rhythm, sending gentle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath armor, yet the movement provides a calm, meditative cadence. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces. Knights sometimes carried small charms or herbs in saddlebags for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate their practical effect, but the ritual itself offers a subtle sense of control. By mid-morning, the path narrows into a shaded woodland track. Branches brush helmet and pauldrons, requiring subtle, constant adjustments. A rabbit darts across the trail, prompting your horse to flinch slightly, and you smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once the animal disappears, tension eases, and the rhythmic cadence of writing resumes. Sunlight filters through leaves, creating soft, moving patterns on armor and earth, a gentle spectacle that encourages calm reflection. By noon, the column pauses beside a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the refreshing touch of air against sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide simple sustenance. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain or travel conditions, giving the mind space to wander. Historians still debate whether silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, quiet suffices. You notice the gentle sounds of water, birdsong, and wind through leaves, small sensory pleasures grounding you in the moment. The afternoon stretches across rolling hills and flat fields. You shift weight continuously, adjusting to uneven ground and the horse's subtle movements. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 drifts through your thoughts. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro, adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetitive rhythm anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the gentle joy of rhythm, steady progress, and subtle victories only you fully appreciate. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse over uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings deep relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and a gentle evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Sleep promises calm respite, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and quiet victories, you find gentle satisfaction and reassurance, ready for the next day's journey. The morning light stretches lazily across the camp, soft and golden, brushing tents, muddy paths, and scattered equipment with a warm, calming glow. You awaken slowly, muscles and joints humming with quiet reminders of previous exertions, each movement a gentle nudge from yesterday's work. The mainstream fact is simple: a night's day begins long before comfort or leisurely meals. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, a companion that shapes the rhythm of your body and your mindset. Historians still debate how standardized morning routines were across regions, but the physical preparation required was consistent, providing structure in a life of travel, endurance, and repetition. Breakfast is practical and simple: a slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water from the nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags that never quite align perfectly. You tighten straps and gauntlets, letting a small wry joke drift through your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The repetition of this ritual establishes a comforting cadence, a predictable rhythm in a life otherwise dictated by unpredictable terrain and changing weather. Armor assembly follows the familiar sequence. You slide into the padded gambeson, quilted layers pressing snugly against your torso. Chainmail interlocks across arms and legs, a flexible mosaic of protection. Cuisses cover thighs, greaves shield shins, pauldrons rest lightly on shoulders, and the breastplate locks securely over your chest. Finally, the helmet settles over your head, muffling distant sounds and enclosing your senses in reassuring weight. Each buckle presses against muscles and skin, compressing comfort for readiness. Humor drifts gently. Imagining yourself as a mobile fortress makes the heavy ritual mentally lighter. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a soothing, meditative soundtrack marking the start of the day. Mounted, the column moves across rolling fields and scattered woodland tracks. Hooves strike mud and stones with steady rhythm, transmitting gentle jolts up your legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath armor, yet movement provides a calming cadence. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some knights carried small charms or herbs tucked into saddlebags, intended for reassurance or minor comfort. Historians still debate their practical effects, but the ritual itself offers a quiet sense of control over the uncertainties of travel. By mid-morning, the path narrows into a shaded woodland trail. Branches brush helmet and pauldrons, requiring constant micro-adjustments in posture. A rabbit darts across the trail, startling your horse slightly, and you can't help but smile. Small woodland creatures, unofficial trainers of night reflexes. Once it disappears, tension eases, and the rhythm of riding resumes. Sunlight filters through leaves, creating soft, moving patterns on armor and ground, a gentle spectacle that draws your attention and quiets the mind. By noon, the group pauses at a shallow stream. Horses drink while you remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the cool touch of air on sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water provide minimal sustenance, enough to carry energy into the afternoon. Conversation is minimal, focused on terrain or small observations about travel. Historians still debate whether shared silence or structured dialogue better maintain morale. Here, quiet is sufficient. You notice the subtle sounds of water, birdsong, and rustling leaves, small pleasures grounding you in the moment. The afternoon stretches across rolling hills and flatter fields. You shift weight continuously, adjusting for uneven ground and the horse's subtle movements. Sweat and grime cling beneath armor, tactile reminders of endurance and persistence. Joke number 2 drifts through your mind softly. Nightly meditation, perfecting micro adjustments while barely moving. Despite fatigue, the repetitive rhythm anchors both body and mind. Each mile brings quiet satisfaction, the gentle joy of rhythm, steady progress, and understated victories only you fully appreciate. Eventually, the column reaches a small village. You dismount carefully, assisting your horse across uneven ground. Gradual armor removal brings deep relief. Gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lifted from skin like shedding a second body. Campfires glow warmly. Meals are simple but nourishing, and a gentle evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Sleep promises calm respite, folding the day's exertion into rest. Amid ordinary toil, repeated rhythms, and quiet victories, you find gentle satisfaction and the subtle reassurance of endurance, ready for the final evening and tomorrow's journey. The morning arrives slowly, soft sunlight spilling across the camp and casting a gentle glow on tents, muddy paths, and scattered gear. You awaken gradually, muscles and joints humming with quiet reminders of previous exertions. The mainstream fact is simple. A night's stay begins long before comfort or leisure, with preparation and attention to detail shaping every movement. Armor rests nearby, heavy yet familiar, both protection and companion. Historians still debate how uniform morning routines were across regions, but the physical demands of readiness were universal, offering structure and grounding in an otherwise unpredictable life. Breakfast is modest. A slab of hardened bread, a thin slice of dried meat, and cold water drawn from the nearby stream. Your squire fusses quietly, adjusting stirrups, reins, and saddlebags. You tighten straps and gauntlets, letting a faint, dry joke drift through your mind. Knights, the original wearable endurance athletes. The ritual, though repetitive, establishes a soothing cadence in a life otherwise dominated by uneven terrain and the slow march of the day. Armor assembly follows its usual sequence. You slide into the padded gambeson, chainmail interlocks over limbs, cuisses cover your thighs, greaves protect shins, pauldrons settle on shoulders, and the breastplate locks over the chest. The helmet finally rests on your head, muffling sound and enclosing your senses in familiar weight. Humor drifts gently. Imagining yourself as a mobile fortress adds levity. The rhythmic clinking of metal becomes a subtle, meditative soundtrack, marking the start of the day. Mounted, the column moves across fields and woodland paths. Hooves strike mud and stone with steady rhythm, sending gentle jolts through legs and spine. Sweat gathers beneath armor, yet the motion carries a meditative calm. A quirky tidbit emerges. Knights sometimes carry charms or herbs for reassurance. Historians still debate their effect, but the ritual itself offers a comforting sense of control. By noon, the group pauses at a stream. You remove helmet and gauntlets, enjoying the cool air on sweat-dampened skin. Bread and water sustain you. Conversation is minimal, and the quiet of nature invites reflection. Afternoon travel stretches across rolling hills, each mile carrying subtle satisfaction in rhythm, repetition, and endurance. Gradually, the day winds down. You dismount, assist your horse, and begin removing armor. Relief washes over you as gauntlets, greaves, pauldrons, and chainmail lift from your skin. Campfires glow softly, meals are nourishing, and the evening breeze carries gentle scents of wood, smoke, and earth. The familiar patterns of armor, movement, and travel fade into the calm of night. The evening settles softly across the village, shadows stretching long and gentle. The distant rustle of trees and flickering campfires a lullaby of ordinary exertion. You sink into the slight comfort of resting muscles, the weight of armor removed, but the memory of its presence lingering in the gentle ache along your back and shoulders. Breath deepens, slow and measured, As the mind drifts over the day's repetitive patterns, the steady cadence of hooves, the minor adjustments to saddle and posture, the fleeting moments of amusement at woodland creatures and small ritualistic charms. Even the chores of tending horses and adjusting equipment take on a quiet, meditative quality, the body recalling its own rhythm in the absence of movement. Your eyes grow heavy as the ambient sounds leaves whispering, fire crackling softly, the distant lowing of livestock wrap around you. Thoughts of the next day fade gently into the background, replaced by the sensation of rest itself, the temporary reprieve from exertion, the subtle relief of muscles unburdened, and the calm of knowing that, despite hardship and repetition, you have endured. Each small victory, each quiet moment of resilience folds softly into the rhythm of existence, neither celebrated nor mourned, simply present. The air cools and the evening darkens, yet a sense of continuity persists. Tomorrow will come with its demands, its weight, its micro adjustments, but for now, you linger in stillness, in calm, in the soft hum of a world that moves around you while you rest. Let the ache and the memory of exertion melt slowly into gentle nothingness, carried away by the whispering wind and the fading glow of firelight. In this quiet, in this ordinary endurance, find the subtle comfort of being alive, resting, and ready to rise again.